Good morning, everyone. Get this thing working here. Welcome to our Swanee River Water Management District Governing Board meeting and public hearing. It is open to the public and available on the website at www.myswaneeriver.com. And at this time, we're going to all rise and have our invocation and our pledge. Mr. Keith, would you? Thank you.
Lord God, we thank you for this day. Father, we take a moment just to ask for your mercy one more time. Father, that you wrap your arms around the people, all the families that are in the path of Milton. Father, it appears to our eyes to be a major storm, but we know that you're in control, Father. And we'll put our faith that you'll put that shear on that storm and slow those winds. Father, we pray for this staff, all the hardworking people involved in keeping these lands running. Father, I pray that you give them strength and mercy. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And for the record, it's October 8th, 2024, and we open our call to order at 9. Would you do a roll call, Ms. Robin?
Chair Johns,
Here?
Mr. Keith,
Here.
Mr. Schwab, Mr. Smith,
Here.
Mr. Sessions,
Here.
Mr. Thompson,
Here.
Mr. Lloyd,
Here.
Mr. Wheeler.
Here.
Madam Chair, we have a quorum.
Thank you, Robin. Before we get too much started here, we are going to do a little housekeeping. We had some updates on our committees, and we have one change that Mr. Wheeler joined the Lands Committee, and I need a recommendation and a vote to include Mr. Wheeler on the Lands Committee.
For a second.
We have a recommendation and we have a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, like sign. Motion carried. Welcome, Mr. Wheeler. We'll put you to work probably on some more committees before too long.
Thank you.
Okay. All righty. Are there any amendments to our agenda?
Yes, ma'am, we have one deletion. Agenda item 17, environmental resource permitting, general works of the district, application number WOD 121211-576-2, Gillard Residence, Denial, Swanee County. It has been removed.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, like sign. Motion carried. We'll move right on into public comment. I have one card here. Keith Rowell, would you like to speak now or 22? All right. If I forget, you need to remind me, okay? Any other public comment? There being none, we'll close public comment and move right on to our consent agenda. Is there a motion on our consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, like sign. Motion carried. All right. Let's go right on into our hydrologic report. That'll be interesting.
Yeah.
Yes, Madam Chair, it should be. Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the board.
Good morning.
Present the hydrologic conditions report for September 2024. Kind of a somber photo I'm starting out with this month. This is the front of the district. This was the parking lot out front. Somewhere back there, we have a building, but this was just post-Hurricane Helene. This was some of the damage that the district actually had from that. I wanted to point out that we had some root masses pulled up. We had lots of trees on the district itself, had some shingles off of the roof, things like that. So they've done a really good job of getting this cleaned up, but this is just, it's heartbreaking to see this, just knowing that, Hurricane Helene came through and kind of caused this catastrophic damage to us, not only us, but also up in North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia as well. So it's a good photo. I like to thank Troy for allowing me to use this, and it's a proper way to start our hydro report for September 2024. All right, rainfall for September 2024, we had a district-wide average of about 6.4 inches, which represents 16% higher than that long-term average of 5.5 inches. We did increase our surplus, which is a good thing. We went from 4.8 inches of surplus at the end of August to a surplus of 8.1 inches at the end of September, mainly moving that window of time forward from losing September of 2023 and picking up that 6.4 inches in September 2024. Looking at the map, that 5 to 7 inch range incorporates the district-wide average for the month. We see most of the rainfall occurs in this 2/3, more or less, of the district. Kind of over in the northern and eastern part of our district, we saw the lesser amounts of rain, 3 to 5 inches in that dark blue, and light blue was less than 3 inches of rainfall. On the flip side, the higher than average amounts, we had 7 to 9 inches in orange. Then we had 9 to 11 inches in red, and we had some areas that were more than 11 inches of rainfall. Dixie County had quite a bit. Levy County had some as well, and just right under Lafayette, right there, that was another spot where we saw more than 11 inches, and that's in that pink color on the map. Okay, so here we are talking about Major Hurricane Helene. Major Hurricane Helene this is an infrared photo of this. Actually made landfall near Perry, I believe it was around 11 p.m. Thursday, September 26th, as a Category 4. It had high-speed winds of 140 miles per hour. And you can kind of see some of those high winds right here in that dark band right there, just destructive winds. Of course, it made its way pretty quickly through Florida and ended up in Georgia, and then becoming a tropical depression and putting lots of rainfall starting in South Georgia and even up into the Carolinas as well. This is the rainfall map for Hurricane Helene. I did want to point out this is not the rainmaker we had at the beginning of August when we had Hurricane Debbie. This time we only got a district-wide average of about 2.1 inches of rain. It was a quick system, didn't really dump a lot of water on us, but like I said, get into South Georgia, that's where we started seeing quite a bit of rainfall up there. I wanted to point out on here the higher amounts of rainfall, 3 to 4 inches in orange, 4 to 5 inches in red. We see those right here is about where they came on shore, and we kind of see those over in the eastern and western parts of that eye wall. More than 5 inches, we saw more than 5 inches actually dumped here in Lafayette and going into Suwannee County as well. So really not a huge rainmaker, but it did help us for our average for the month as far as rain is concerned. This is a storm surge graphic I wanted to show. This is actually the Steinhatchee River at Steinhatchee River, excuse me. I had August 1st of 2023 going all the way to October of 2023, that's in blue. On top of that is the August of 2024, and it went to September of 2020, that's September 26th of this year. What I wanted to point out here was these 3 spikes right here are results of the hurricanes, and I'm going to go through those now. The first one we had was Major Hurricane Idalia. That was August 30th of 2023. Around 7:45 in the morning is when this spike occurred for the storm surge at Steinhatchee. We saw 9.7 feet at that gauge. Going forward, Hurricane Debbie, this was the beginning of August 5th. This was 11:15 in the morning, 5.4 feet of storm surge. And the biggest one that we saw was Major Hurricane Helene on the 26th of September. This was around 10:30 at night. This was the last gauge reading we had before that gauge got washed away. Yeah, this was 11.3 feet. That's quite a bit of storm surge that we saw. That was even more than we saw for Major Hurricane Idalia back in 2023. Okay, getting back to our rainfall. So we'll talk a little bit more about this. So this is departure from normal precipitation for the past 30 days. This is from the 7th of September through the 6th of October. What I wanted to point out in our district, we have this green color, which is anywhere from breaking even to about 5 inches of surplus. That's over in kind of the western part of our district. But as we start to move east, where we didn't get as much rainfall this past month, we're starting to see a little bit more yellow color, which is anywhere from breaking even to about 5 inches of deficit. We did have an orange color up here. This is in Columbia County, Hamilton County, and Suwannee County, anywhere from 5 to 10 inches of deficit that we're seeing there. So just kind of where the hurricane went, we got a little bit more rainfall, but we're definitely a little bit behind in the eastern part of our district. Stream flow conditions for September 2024 actually were pretty high for the beginning and ending of the months. We saw flows in either the above normal, the 75th to 90th, or the greater than 90th percentiles. And I wanted to point out most of the highs to end the month were up here in Georgia, Ocklawaha, Thomasville, Little River, Lapahad, Withlacoochee, Quitman, Lapahad, Statenville, even going down into our district, Withlacoochee, Panetta, and Lapahad, Jennings all ended in the month in the high. So that's where all that rainfall kind of came from the hurricane, and it's kind of making its way down currently. We did have some other rivers that showed an end of the month high, greater than 90th percentile, and that was Osceola, Lamont, Finn Holloway, and then we had some more rivers that were above normal in flow, the 75th to 90th, over in the Suwannee, Rock Bluff, Branford, Ellaville, and even over in the Econfina and Steinhatchee. But as you kind of go into the eastern part of our district, over in the Santa Fe Basin, really kind of saw normal flows for the beginning and ending of the month. Not quite as much of rainfall effect over in that area as we saw up in South Georgia and even coming down into our western part of our district. This is upper Florida and aquifer levels. This is the end of August. I showed this previous board meeting, but I'll do this to compare with what we had this month. What we were starting to see in August was an increase in the above 90th percentile. We were really going up because we got quite a bit of rain in August, as evidenced by most of the wells trending upward from July. We did see quite a bit of 75th to 90th percentiles all around the district as well, and we did have some areas of just normal levels. Jefferson County into Taylor County, over into Bradford, Alachua, Levy, even over into Lafayette and Dixie and Gilchrist as well. We fast forward 1 month, pretty similar, not quite as an expansive area of the above 90th percentile, but we are still seeing quite a bit of that from stretching from Levy to Dixie, up through Taylor, Madison, Suwannee, even into Lafayette and Columbia counties. We're seeing those really high levels as well. Most of the district is still seeing the 75th to 90th. A lot of areas in that lighter blue color. Pretty much every county has at least one well that's showing 75th to 90th percentile in well levels. Not quite as many wells trending upward at this point. Most of them kind of trending downward just because we got so much recharge at the end of August, well, in the month of August into September. But all in all, looking really good for our groundwater for September 2024. This is U.S. Drought Monitor. This was released last Thursday, October 3rd. I wanted to show this. Really, there's not much to show, which is a very good thing for us on the drought side. No issues with drought or even abnormally dry conditions in our district currently. The only abnormally dry conditions we see in the state of Florida are over in the Panhandle. I did want to mention, I promise you that La Nina is going to be here eventually. That is a 71% chance of happening from September through November. So La Nina is coming. It's just for some reason taking its time. I don't know why. But that's expected to continue through the winter into the new year and from January to March of 2025. So we'll be on the lookout for that La Nina. With that, they've kind of changed this slightly with the seasonal outlook from National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration. We're no longer seeing higher or above normal rainfall probabilities. Now we're seeing equal chances of below average or below average rainfall chance for the next 3 months for October through December. We're going to see above normal temperature probabilities, and this is one of the characteristics of a winter La Nina, is more or less a higher than average temperature probability for our area. Now, Atlantic hurricane frequencies, we did make it through. Last board meeting was actually September 10th, so that was the climatological peak of hurricane season. We're currently right here. So we are kind of on the way down, but we do have a couple more peaks to deal with as far as probabilities for hurricanes and tropical storms are concerned. Those occur really kind of late in October, and it looks like kind of early in November, but still got at least a couple months left in this hurricane season. So we definitely need to keep our eyes open for anything that's looking to form in the Atlantic or even the Gulf. This is the Atlantic hurricane season update. I just wanted to show this again. I've shown this last board meeting just kind of as a reminder. Named storms 17 to 24, hurricanes 8 to 13, and major hurricanes 4 to 7. And we are still seeing a 90% chance of above normal hurricane season. Down here on the hurricane names, these were marked out because these were already named as of the previous board meeting. I'm going to go ahead and mark out 7 more. We had 7 more from the last board meeting to this board meeting now. So We had Gordon, Helene, Isaac, Joyce, Kirk, Leslie, and Milton just got named a couple of days ago. Up next would be Nadine, and that will give us 14 named storms so far this season, if Nadine does come to fruition. Looking at the map over here, this is a little bit dated, but this morning's update wasn't too much different. Kirk has since dispersed. I think it's headed on over to Europe, but it's no longer even a threat. I think it's more or less a depression now. Leslie has fallen into a tropical storm, and it's headed in the North Atlantic. And of course, these two spots here are 20% chance of formation in the next 7 days. One of them looks to be going up into the Atlantic, which is good, away from us. The other one possibly curving up into the Atlantic. We'll just have to keep an eye on that one as well. And of course, the big story is Milton. Milton was formed over this, I believe, this past weekend. It hit Category 5 yesterday with, I believe it was 185 mile per hour winds, 200 plus mile per hour gusts. Just insane. But it's currently going... it's currently fallen from a Category 5 to a Category 4. I think it's starting to kind of transform a little bit. I did hear there's eye wall replacement, which means the storm will broaden quite a bit. But once it hits land, which is expected to hit Tampa Bay probably early morning on Thursday, it's supposed to encounter some wind shear. So it's going to be reduced to probably a high-end Category 3 when it comes on shore. But it's still going to be devastating for that area, and then it's going to traverse the state, go right back into the Atlantic, and I think it'll probably be a tropical storm at that point. But yeah, just not good. But I did want to mention that to the board. All right, finally, our September 2024 summary. We had a rainfall amount of 6.4 inches, which represented 16% higher than that long-term average of 5.5 inches. 12-month surplus that we had at the end of August of 4.8 inches was increased to 8.1 inches, and that's due to moving that window forward and picking up quite a bit more rainfall this past September 2024. District-wide upper Florida and aquifer levels fell slightly. We went from the 86th percentile in August to the 85th, so not really that much. But we did see a median level decrease of about 0.3 of a foot across our monitored wells. As I mentioned, we do have the La Nina is going to rear its head eventually, but it's going to be probably a 71% chance of that happening sometime between September and November, and that's going to continue through the winter of 2025, which includes January to March. And as I mentioned, as far as the drought monitor is concerned, no district county is currently showing any drought characteristics. I don't expect for that to really change with this week's update either. And finally, 13 named storms we've had so far this season, and that's including Gordon, Isaac, Helene, Joyce, Kirk, Leslie, and Milton since our last board meeting. So that's 7 more storms added to the other 6. Madam Chair, I'll take any questions that the board may have.
Any questions from the board?
I'm scared. Don't ask me nothing.
You might throw another hurricane at us, right? I guess, unless I'm just reading it wrong, I was a little surprised that our aquifer levels weren't going up with all the rain, but maybe we just didn't get enough water to change that.
So what we had, Madam Chair, last month, I wrote that down. In August, we got 11.7 inches of rain as a district-wide average. The reason why this month we only got, let's go back to the beginning. Oops. Yeah, this month it was above average, but it wasn't quite 11 inches. There was a lot of recharge in the month of August, and then just kind of dropped a little bit because we didn't have enough to keep up with it, with that. But I mean, it's still looking really good. We've got plenty of areas of greater than 90th percentile. And then most of them still in 75th to 90th as well. So all in all, I mean, it's still fairly high pretty much everywhere in the district. But yeah, that would be why we didn't get quite as much rain this past month in September as we got in August.
Okay.
Madam Chair,
Yes,
probably with all the water that I see standing now, Live Oaks are a very good example of that. You can't go hardly anywhere without seeing somebody having a pond in their field or in their yard. Does that contribute substantially to the recharge in the area, or is that water just only leaching out from evaporation, or is it actually going down?
Madam Chair? So a lot of what we're seeing is the standing water. A lot of that probably has to do with the area that it's in. It could be more or less a up in this area where it's kind of confined, semi-confined, so it doesn't really go into the aquifer as quickly as, say, if it fell down in Dixie or Levy County, where it's more or less unconfined. A lot of that too probably has to do, and if we take a look at Suwannee County right here, great example, we were above 90th percentile. Chances are the aquifer gets to a point where it just doesn't want to go down. You get what's considered groundwater flooding. So that is a possibility in this area, especially with being above 90th percentile. That would be what I would say that more than likely that is happening is it's either in a more confined area, or it's the fact that it's more or less the aquifer is full in that area, kind of.
I see water standing in areas I hadn't seen in a long, long time, so I think we ought to be in a better position from an aquifer standpoint, maybe not from a land use or landowner standpoint, but I think the aquifer has an opportunity to recharge at a better rate than it has in the past. Maybe we'll offset some of this La Nina we got coming up, dry weather.
Then that's very true. Now, I also do want to mention that we do have some, we're going to have some minor flooding in a lot of our gauges in the Suwannee coming down from South Georgia. That's going to contribute to the going into the aquifer as well, some of the recharge there. A lot of those springs will start to estival, and we'll get some of that recharging as well. I know on down the middle Suwannee down to the lower Suwannee, we're looking at a minor flood and action stage in a lot of places.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, thank you very much.
Madam Chair.
All righty. Do we have any cooperating agencies today?
No, ma'am. I'm not aware of any this morning.
Thank you. Tom, how about you? You got anything for us today?
Need to make the board aware that, I don't know if you'll recall, I think it was last year, or earlier this year, we had a petition for a declaratory statement from a gentleman named Mr. William Merriman. And it was he had filed it. It was kind of an odd duck of a petition, because he's a property owner in St. Johns County, and he had been denied a permit, or I'm sorry, had actually been, was challenging a neighbor's permit and saying that they had permitted it incorrectly and all of that. So he was pro se, and part of his strategy was that he did a petition for declaratory statement to all of the other water management districts as well as DEP, asking them to give a declaratory statement on what the state of the law was with regard to St. John's. Now, so we processed it, and we were going to, my recommendation was going to be for you all to deny it, but he ended up withdrawing the petition before it got here. At any rate, Mr. Merriman has since filed a lawsuit in the Middle District of Florida in Jacksonville. It is against St. Johns County, as well as St. Johns Water Management District, as well as all of the other water management districts, DEP, the governor, all of the judges on the First District Court of Appeal, and several other folks, and me personally. So I was served with that lawsuit on after the last meeting. We have sent it to the insurance company. They're providing a defense. I don't expect there is a very high likelihood that anything will come of that, but it's being defended by insurance right now. So, but the district has been sued, and so I need to make you aware of it, and so you know what's going on. But it's at the no one's filed an answer yet. It's at the very preliminary stages.
And if it's okay to ask, what is he actually suing for? What is his reason?
Not a particularly cogent train of thought in the complaint. He's very certain that he feels cheated. He's very certain he feels he's right. He's very certain that government has done him wrong. Other than that, not a lot of legal causes of action.
Was it over a permit he asked for, or?
So his neighbor got a permit for a pond, and then apparently Mr. Merriman's well went bad or something to that effect. And now in Mr. Merriman's mind, the pond caused the well to go bad. Now, I don't know that he has good evidence for that, but at any rate, they got a pond, the well went bad, and so in his mind, it's connected. And then he did not get any relief from St. John's Water Management District on that.
Okay.
And so it's one of those, he's just, he's spreading it bigger and bigger and bringing in lots of other agencies and all of that. We had a telephone call with the general counsel with the DEP. What they're trying to do is coordinate all of this under the Attorney General and have everybody sort of coordinate with them. Because the Attorney General defends the judges and the state officials and all that anyway.
Okay. Any other questions? Nope. Thank you, Tom.
Thanks, man.
All right. Good morning, Tim.
Madam Chair, members of the board, those in attendance, good morning. For business and community services, you'll find items number 10 through 18 on this morning's agenda. Items number 12, 14, and 15 were approved by way of consent, so thank you for that. Item number 16 is an informational item, and item number 17 was pulled from the agenda. So this morning, we'll start with Ben Glass from our Office of Administration. He'll come up and give you a facilities update, which is listed as item number 10. He will then present to you items number 11 and items number 13 for your consideration and approval. Those will be on BCS page 1 and BCS page 3. And then we'll end with Leroy Marshall covering item number 18.
Okay.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board. Madam Chair, with your indulgence, if we can, I'm going to take you through a couple of pictures of the facility damage. Robbie gave you a little bit of a preview, but also speaking to that, I can thankfully report once again our building that we are renovating was spared. But in the interest of getting folks home to prepare for the upcoming storm, we can forego the tour. If that's all right with you all, and we'll just postpone that to November.
Yep.
So this is a view from the district's back parking lot, staff parking lot, looking out the road. There's a road underneath all those trees. This was Friday morning following the storm. So you can see a little corner of our generator. It runs our facility here in the event we lose power, but more importantly than that, and particularly thankful for Tyler, it runs our servers. So our servers won't go down, which means things like our river levels page stay up in the event that we lose power here at the facility. It was also thankfully spared by the trees. So this picture you're looking at on the left, that is going to be the southwest wing of the main facility. There were 2 trees on that wing. We'll see a second picture. Thankfully, underneath the tree you're looking at there was only minimal damage. The roof line that you see on the right, that is the building we're in right now. So that ridge cap was totally peeled back. Lots of shingles. This was the only ridge cap we lost, but the shingles, that was typical across all of our roofs. Got a contractor out, got the roofs tarped Friday. So hopefully mitigated any issues going on from that damage. This is the second tree that was on the southwest wing. A little more damage here. As you can see, it was a pine and it went right through the soffit. Thankfully, there doesn't appear to be any structural damage on the wall. We've had it inspected, had it mitigated until we can get the roof replaced. So that's a view of the damage with the tree removed. And this is the view of our south entrance on 49. You see the Widowmaker snag hung up there. There's several trees behind that snag between the road and the entrance. This is the view from the picture Robbie showed you. This is a view standing with that behind you, looking back across the main parking lot. There's other trees down. That would be the north entrance off of 49. So we were pretty well blocked in and treed in. And thank you to Lorna and Caitlin. We got a land management contractor out here, came out of assess Friday, worked Saturday and Sunday, and had us back open Monday.
Wow.
They did a good job cleaning up for us. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions about the facility.
Any questions? Yes, sir.
Ben, we entrusted this place to you.
My best.
Oh, dear.
The damages obviously are insured losses, right? To a certain amount. I mean, I know we got probably a big deductible, but
Madam Chair. So that, yes, sir, they are. We already have a claim open from Debbie that includes a new roof, so we can't get any better than the new roof. We're working with the insurance company now, and the contractor to see structurally what's going to need to be done. If we're going to have to do any work on the trusses where there was damage on the structure. There's actually the next item I'll present to you is a contract related to addressing that.
Madam Chair,
Yes, uh-huh.
that interesting question. If we have a claim open and we're meeting a deduct, is cleanup part of a loss in a hurricane situation? Can we have any kind of service to help offset deductible?
Madam Chair. So we can certainly explore that with the insurance company. I do not, the only tree that I believe would be eligible is the one that caused damage. But we are also exploring FEMA reimbursing us for that cost. So we've tracked it in accordance with their standards. So one way or the other, we should get that cost reimbursed.
some undetermined time in the future.
Correct.
At least you've got leaks taken care of temporarily, and I'm sure that there are many, many roofs in line to get fixed. So keep us updated and
Yes,
see
ma'am.
how it goes. All right. Any other questions for Ben? All righty. Thank you, sir.
Yes, ma'am. So I have two more items to present to you all this morning. The first of which, Madam Chair, is actually speaking to what you just referenced. This is on BCS page 1. This is staff recommends to authorize the executive director to enter into contract with and issue task work assignments for Blue Sky Restoration Contractors, LLC, for an aggregate amount not to exceed $1 million. So this contractor was recommended by our insurance company. The work was awarded to them based on that recommendation and references from some local governments that they've done work for. It was awarded outside of the usual bid process. So this would tie back to our emergency order relating to Hurricane Debbie, as well as the governor's executive order that waives those statutory requirements. This contract would mainly address the roof, but is also addressing, if you'll recall back to Debbie, we got some water intrusion in the building. So they're going to address that issue also, that remediation, carpet, paint, that kind of thing. The roof we're looking at while we're having the work done, insurance, we currently have a shingle roof. Insurance will cover up to the new cost of the shingle roof. We're looking at utilizing the DEP grant we received from the legislature for our facilities in this past session. We're looking at utilizing those funds to upgrade from that shingle roof to a standing seam metal roof. And that cost would be included in these TWAs. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Ben on that
I'm
one?
just curious, the difference between the shingle and the metal, is it substantial or is it?
It was, I have that number. See if I can find it on my spreadsheet. It was around, okay, $83,000 was the difference between the shingle and the metal roof. Some odd.
I don't know how many square feet of roof we've got, but it's got to be a lot.
It is. I don't have that number with me today, but we do have that number. And I neglected. That's a new roof on the facility we're in, the conference center here, as well as the main building across the way. We've already taken care of the lab, and the Kirby building has some minor damage, but won't even exceed the deductible on that. So
Okay. Good. Okay. Good down here?
Good.
All right. Sounds great, Ben. Thank you.
ma'am.
We need to make a motion.
Oh, sorry.
A second.
Would you,
Read the recommendation.
yes, please.
Staff recommends the governing board authorize the executive director to enter into contract with and issue task work assignments for Blue Sky Restoration Contractors LLC for an aggregate amount not to exceed $1 million.
Is there a
Madam Chair.
Second.
we have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, like sign. Motion carried.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Board. Second item I have for your consideration today is on BCS page 3. This is to enter into contract with Alliance Dairies to implement agricultural cost share practices for an amount not to exceed $2.656 million. So if you'll recall back to our last meeting in September, Ray Hodge, who is sitting behind me, presented on the project we've been doing with United Dairies of Florida. That project came up with sustainability implementation plans for the participating dairies. This is the first of those plans to move forward into a construction phase to actually implement the plan. This is going to take Alliance Dairies wastewater storage pond and expand it. So what that's going to do is right now they have between 1 to 3 days of storage in their lagoon. They're going to expand that to a 12-acre pond, which is going to give them between 50 and 100 days of storage. So the timing of the application of that wastewater can be based more on the crop need and for both nutrients and water rather than the storage time dictated by the pond. So with that, we're expecting the project to give us an estimated groundwater reduction benefit of 300,000 gallons a day in an average year condition. So in normal rainfall, that's what we would expect the water quantity benefit to be, as well as 13,800 pounds of nitrogen loading to the groundwater reduced. And that's the attenuated number to the groundwater. So that's not at land surface. And this project is located in Gilchrist and Dixie County, or excuse me, Gilchrist and Levy County, in the Fanning Manatee Priority Focus Area. It will help us advance the goals of the BMAP in that area. Happy to answer any questions.
Madam Chair, we just announced I'll not be voting on this agenda item due to Alliance Dairies being a sibling organization with Swanee Valley Feeds.
All
I
right.
filed the paperwork, Mr. Robin.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Question?
Just one question. I noticed that as a part of the cost of construction, and obviously there's a $500,000 annual maintenance and monitoring fee that's in there. That's obviously going to be an ongoing expense. I'm assuming that it's pretty expensive to maintain. I guess, do we have a commitment from Alliance that that's going to be perpetuated and that they're going to keep up with it?
So yes, sir. The dairy is here, so I don't want to speak for them, but I believe we do. I can also tell you that they are a permitted dairy, which means that they are monitored by DEP and have a monitoring program with them that they already participate in that will monitor some aspects
All right.
of this project.
Sure.
Yeah.
I make a motion to approve.
We have a motion and a second. Any other questions? Okay, I have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, like sign. Motion carried.
Thank you.
All right, Ben.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board. We had one item on the agenda. It was thankfully taken off. Our ERP team has worked hard with that applicant to get that information in. So they are now under review of the information that was submitted, and hopefully we can get that out here pretty soon. Also want to give a congratulations to our ERP team. They typically run anywhere between 100 to 120 applications in-house per month. They actually were able to get that down to 99, which is awesome. So they are definitely putting in that extra time to get those applications out.
Wonderful.
Also going on in the division, the FEMA RFQ that the board approved, the contracts are now out with the consultants, getting those signed so that they can get going on the next round of FEMA grants, the next 5 years. Speaking of the FY24 that you allowed the executive director to submit, we have that back. Again, that's 1.04 or $1,043,000, and that is for the detailed study in the Santa Fe for the cities, the city of Alachua and all the cities that we needed. This was the last step in order to get that Santa Fe basin completed with the most accurate data that we can produce. So that's kind of where we are. Just wanted to give you guys an update of what the division had going on.
Wonderful.
Any questions?
Any questions from the board? Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Thank you, Tim. Good morning, Caitlin.
Morning, Madam Chair, members of the board. The Division of Outreach and Operations has 6 items for your consideration today. Item number 20, our communications overview and work plan for FY25 will be presented by our communications chief, Troy Roberts. Our HDS presentation overview and work plan will be presented, which is number 24, will be presented by Vince Robinson, our field program manager for the Office of Hydrologic Data Services. Items number 19, 21, and 23 are for informational purposes, and I will be presenting item number 22. With that, we will start with Mr. Roberts.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board. As always, it's a pleasure to be in front of you, especially this time of year when we get to highlight our recent activities and also look forward to a new year ahead. Obviously, October 1st is the start of our fiscal year. Also a time that I enjoy coming to show you all the stuff that we accomplished this last year and, again, kind of talk about what we've got planned and take any feedback or questions you guys may have. So we'll obviously start off with the recap of last year. Our goal in this office is always to educate the public and make the district look good. I always tell Hugh, as long as I'm making him look good and Caitlin as well, then I feel like I'm doing my job, and that applies to y'all as well. And so I'm happy with our deliverables that we had this past year from projects, and I'm excited to show them to you. So we'll start with the outreach efforts that we finished and completed this year. We had 41 presentations, and this kind of runs the gamut. There is no one specific presentation that I have. It would be nice and easy if there was, just to have one PowerPoint presentation and be able to tailor that and use that for every single group. But every single group is different. Sometimes I'll be talking to 5-year-olds and getting them to understand how water works can be difficult. And then other times I'll be talking to elected officials, and sometimes getting them to understand how water works is difficult too. But you have to explain it in a way that everybody can understand it, whether it's civic organizations or it's students. This photo here is from the Follow the Water event that IFAS does. This is where they bring master gardeners throughout the state, and they go to the Okefenokee, and then they follow the Suwannee River down to the Gulf of Mexico. And so we help them twice a year with this presentation. We'll either go to Suwannee Springs or we'll go to White Sulphur Springs, any other locations that we may have, and kind of talk them through the river and what we do here at the district. But again, different presentation for a different group, but they are normally all well received, which is fantastic. We did 50 press releases this year. This is an update or a slight increase from the 46 previously. So we're averaging about 1 a week, depending on what's going on. Continuing our outreach efforts, I wanted to highlight some of our social media use efforts this year just because of the tremendous spike that we saw this year. Facebook itself saw a nearly 240% increase in our reach, which means we hit approximately 477,000 different people. We're reaching people through social media. If these numbers show you, it includes increases in content interactions, which means people are actually clicking on what we're posting to either read more about or look at the photos, or when you see link clicks, mean they're following us to one of our websites. So if you see that 23.4% on content interactions, 45.1% on link clicks, we're still using Instagram and X. X is a little harder. Over the last couple years, the number of people using that has decreased, but it is still a great tool for getting out information quickly, especially when it comes to storms and hurricanes. That's where people typically go. But these numbers are fantastic, and just because we thought we might have some questions, we can actually break down where all these people are from and who they are. So for social media, that would be YouTube and Facebook and Instagram, where I can pull our analytics. 63.2% of our visitors to our social media websites are women. 7.6 are from Live Oak, of men and women both. 4.8 from Lake City, 3.1 from Gainesville. So that makes up a good bit of our traffic. And obviously, you look at High Springs and Branford and Perry, obviously they make up smaller percentages, but when you total it, that gets to 100%. So, of course, the United States is our number one most visited country. Number two might surprise you. It's Nigeria. Number three is Belgium. So I don't know what we're putting out there that Nigeria and Belgium are interested in, but we're pulling visitors from there, whether it's Americans who are overseas and looking at what's going on back home, or we're just drawing interest from some other countries. Fascinating to look at, though. So it's always interesting to see who's looking at our content and try to rationalize why they're looking at it. More outreach efforts here. These are videos that we completed in the previous fiscal year, and this year we utilized them through different media sources, whether it's television, YouTube, and social media. We did 3 videos on algae and SAV monitoring, water quality, and permitting through our social media channels. Those were seen more than 210,000 times. Permit to Protect commercial, which I'm going to show you in a second if you have not seen it. On YouTube, it was seen more than 53,000 times, and that's the number of times people actually watched it. If you watch YouTube on your phone or on your television, you can click off of it after 10 or 15 seconds if you don't want to watch the rest of it. But that's how many times it was actually watched through. If you're looking at the number of people who skipped it after 15 seconds, I think we're at 400,000. So whether or not they saw all of it or just a little bit of it, they're still seeing Swanee River Water Management District, and it's still promoting awareness of us and what we do. On broadcast television, we saw a reach of 83,778. And through other digital advertising accounts, we had more than 350,000 different views. So our videos were seen. I know they were seen because the commercial you're about to see, I'm in for a brief second. And I know how many people commented to me, "Oh yeah, we saw you in the commercial." And I'm like, great. But it's being seen, which means that the awareness for our district is growing and people are seeing the content that we're putting out there. So I'm going to click forward. Hopefully this will work on the first try and doesn't require Tyler helping, but this is the 30-second commercial that we've been running for about the last 6 months or so.
Our rivers, our springs, our hiking trails, and favorite fishing holes. The Suwannee River Water Management District's Permit to Protect program exists to balance the needs of people with the needs of nature. Whether it's a deck or dock on the river, or a residence or driveway in the floodway, district staff will help permit your project while protecting our important natural resources and the enjoyable activities around them. Find out more at mysuwanneeriver.com.
So there's the commercial. Again, we've got a lot of positive feedback on that. One of the other, and probably the biggest project that we've worked on this year is the online SUA website. And I've spoken to y'all about that before, and kind of updated you on the process of how we've been working on it. Obviously, this is something that will help residents and also visitors more easily obtain special use authorization permits. Up until now, people have had to call and they've had to talk with staff who've had to write down all the information, and then they've had to file a part for our records and then send off the other part in the mail. So when people go visit our district lands, they have a little form that says that, hey, we're allowed to be here. Obviously, that's a little more complicated process than being able to go on a website and click a couple buttons and have it emailed directly to you. And that's the way it's going to work. You go on there, you put a request in, staff can authorize it immediately. Obviously, it'll probably be done between 8 and 5 unless somebody just feels like doing some work at 1 or 2 a.m. we're happy with it. The website is completed. It's currently in our beta testing phase because we don't want to launch it with, any potential bugs or issues. So we're having to work through to make sure that everything's perfect, but we expect that launch to probably be within the next 30 days. And I'm going to show you the website real quick if Tyler will bring it up for me. So you've seen a screenshot of this before. Mr. Schwab, unfortunately, is not here to see the working version. I know that he had pointed out that the photos were the same and all of that, but this is the actual website that we have. You can go up here, you can enter the track name, go specifically to a track. You can look at the different counties that we have. You can look at all the different activities that we allow SUAs for, so ATV riding, camping, fishing, different night use programs. And then you can actually just go scroll through all of our tracks as well and see what amenities are available. So for example, if we're looking at the Belmont track, we can see that there are these 3 activities available. Let's say we want to do boat canoe camping. You can click on the website, put in the date that you want to do it, where you're wanting to take out at, where you're wanting to put in your information. You submit the application, it goes right to our land management staff for approval. And each of these applications change depending on the activity. So if you see the way the boat canoe camping one looks, frogging, for example, you just need a start and end date. And so obviously those change depending on the activity, but this is going to help our residents and visitors get SUAs quicker and more easily, and also free up the staff time that we have that has been allocated to the SUAs that we get throughout the year. All right, moving on. So we like doing feature stories every year. We like to be able to highlight some areas of the district that may not be as media worthy as others, or at least we may think they are, but getting traction on them may be a little more difficult. So we picked 3 this year. In the past, we have kind of highlighted projects and groups that we work with. And what we wanted to start doing is highlighting district activities that we're actually doing and bring some awareness to those. So this year we chose to do the district use of GIS and its importance, which obviously over the last several months now is very important with hurricanes that we have. And I know that both Paul and Andrew have been working to create a lot of maps that show different impacts and flooding information and all of that we can provide to counties and cities who may need it. We completed a story on hunting on district lands, and then we also completed one on water use. Here are a couple of photos of each of them. You see David on the left. You see Paul and Andrew in the middle with some equipment that they're working with, and then hunting on the right. So we did written stories for each of these. We did photography, and we also did videos. The videos are a little long, and so I thought bringing all 3 of those in here to highlight may take a little more time than we want. But I put together something that I guess the kids today would call a sizzle reel, which kind of combines all of those elements, sets it to music, and gives you a little bit of preview of what those are going to look like. So we'll play this one as well. So I want to thank staff for their efforts in assisting with that. Putting folks in front of camera who are not used to being in front of camera can be difficult at times. And again, as somebody who is used to it, I understand there is still a preparation process before you have to get in front of camera. But David King and Warren Zwanko were both instrumental in the water use story. Andrew Neal and Paul Buchanan were instrumental in the GIS one. And I know FWC is not here, but Ashley Williams with FWC was helpful in the hunting one. She didn't speak as a representative as of FWC, but she was very helpful in making that work because I am not a hunter. I don't know how to set up a lot of turkey hunting stuff. And we went out there and her group, the Gator Gobblers, that use some of our district lands for hunting, kind of did everything for us. It made my job really easy. So accolades where they are due. So we also completed some advertorials this year in Family Magazine. We had brochures that we printed that we have been distributing at various events. So a lot of awareness this year that we've brought to the district, and obviously we want to keep that going into the new year ahead. Each of you have our communications plan that gives a more detailed look at what we plan on doing. But just to kind of highlight some of these things, the first one is a district calendar. We thought about just using photographs that myself and other staff have used, but we thought this would be a great time to get input from the public. So we put out a request for photos to be submitted from local photographers. If it's on our district land, if it's in the district, and you have a great photo that you think is worthy of being included, we asked for it. And we received more than 90 submissions from people throughout the district. Some of them are amazing, and it was really difficult to cut down on those because one photographer would submit 5 or 6 photos, and it's like, well, we don't want to use 5 or 6 photos from one photographer. We can only use one, so we can spread the love a little bit, and that was difficult. But we think we've got a great collection of those. Our goal is to highlight district activities, district initiatives throughout the year. April is Springs Protection Awareness Month, and so we want to make sure when the month of April is there, that's one of the things that we're focusing on the calendar. So in addition to showing photographs that are taken by photographers, and we will give them credit, and we plan on bringing them into the office once they're selected and doing a framed photo and taking a photo that we can use on social media. But making sure this is done before January 1st so we can disseminate it through our communities and make sure everybody has calendars and they can see these great photos and our great district lands. We're also working on a district land signage update at our some of our featured sites. We want to improve the kiosks that are out there. We're looking at possibly improving some of the welcome signage as well. So working with land management, we're identifying those locations and trying to figure out exactly what we want that to look like, and make sure that when you're going to a featured district land, it's a featured district land. We want everything out there to look beautiful, and we want the signage to match the property. Speaking of district lands, we want to update photography. This is probably going to be a 3-year process because we do have 120 sites. And so we're going to kind of spread that out over the next couple of years. But again, we've got all these beautiful properties that we own, all these tracks, and we want to make sure that people are aware that they're there and also see how beautiful they are and what type of recreational activities are offered. Feature stories, we're going to keep doing that. We've got 4 that we've identified. 1 or 2 of them are going to kind of focus on flooding. Again, very noteworthy, and especially with what we've been going through, but making sure that we are talking about flood risk and making sure that people understand what goes into potential flooding and how they can expect that and where they can get resources to understand, we've got a hurricane coming and you may flood. Our Leave No Litter campaign is something that we focus on every year. We want to update our campaign materials. We've been using the same ones for a couple of years now, so it's time for a refresh there. We have our FEMA flood conference coming up in January. Leroy and his staff and I have been working on that. We are looking at late January at Florida Gateway College, so you'll start seeing some information going out about that probably in the next couple of weeks, letting people, our government agencies that we work with and people who deal with flooding, we want to make sure that they come to this and then they can ask questions and get all the information they need regarding flooding. And then our fixed point photography kiosk, we plan on putting these at some of our featured sites so people can get photos when they're there. If you go out by yourself, it's hard to get anything other than a selfie. But if you've got a place to put your camera, you can take that, tag us in it, and then we can see all the beautiful photos that are taken out there. So excited about the upcoming year. I think it's going to be a busy year. And I'm, as always, appreciative of y'all's support. And if you have any questions, I am here.
Questions or comments?
Really have it.
All right.
Go ahead.
Troy, remarkable. I mean, we've envisioned this for years, and it's starting to come to fruition. Good job. Stay with it. We're behind you. Let us know what we can do.
You know, Madam Chair, I always appreciate the support, and Caitlin obviously gives me a lot of it, and so does you. And our staff are very willing to do anything that I ask them to do. And sometimes I know that I'm asking for a lot when it comes to certain things, but they are always willing to do it. And I think that kind of collaboration and group effort definitely help produce some amazing things.
Madam Chair,
Yep.
just to second that, I mean, some of the material you guys put out is top notch. We all get on a lot of different web pages, a lot of different pieces of content out there, and I don't think there's much that comes close to what we're putting out. It's very, very good.
Yep.
Sure.
Yep.
Yeah, just to reiterate what they've said, but communication and image for this district is huge. And I've seen a dramatic change or turnaround in perception and interaction with community members over the last 3 years. You guys are doing a great job, and whatever this board can do to support you, we want to do that.
Ditto. Great. It is. It's just what you put out is just very professional, informative, and it's really reaching a lot of people. Good job.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Madam Chair, members of the board, thank you for your kind words. Troy does a phenomenal job. He does it with the support of a lot of staff, like he mentioned, but he's, I think, interjected by Hugh and Tim and Amy and the rest of the D5 team with ideas, inundated with ideas a lot. Certainly, I'll speak for myself, for me, a lot. And he manages those and pedals that bike really, really well with his budget and with his one-man crew. And I echo everything you said. He does a phenomenal job. And what is important to me, and I think to the district and certainly to the board, is that we're putting out material that is informational and is important and is relevant to the times and is meeting a critical need. We're not just sharing things to share them absent a purpose or an intention. And that's what I really appreciate about Troy, is that I can take him an idea or a concept. I actually mentioned one to him this week that we're going to be working on with Amy Brown relative to MFLs, and a pencil draw or a dry erase drawing she did on a board in Hugh's office that the rest of us said, we need that. That helps us understand MFLs a little bit better. So that's kind of how those things manifest themselves, and it takes somebody who can bird hunt those pretty good and make them happen, and Troy certainly does that. So thank you for your kind words, and thank you for his hard work. We have a lands and acquisition item for you today that is in your packet on OPS page 6. And I think this is the item that you had some public comment requests for, that relative to what Mr. Rao. So the recommendation from staff is to approve the ranking of land acquisition projects to prioritize funding for fiscal year 2024 and 2025. And I'm going to talk through this memorandum more than just read it, because I think the context is relevant and important. So Florida statute, as you see referenced here, allows our district, which y'all are familiar with, to purchase property and fee and less than fee to support our 4 core mission areas, which are flood protection, natural systems restoration, water supply sustainability, and water quality protection. And our lands with the district are acquired through a voluntary willing seller program. So historically, and especially in the last 8 to 10 years, the district has purchased property as those properties have been submitted to the district for acquisition. And all purchases, as you may recall, are subject to governing board approval and available funding. The district currently has 4 conservation easement projects, which you have seen come to you in the land acquisition activity report every month and are listed on the map that y'all receive every month, that y'all approved previously, all in 2023 for due diligence. So these 4 projects are projects that you have all seen You've approved for due diligence, which means we work out terms of the easement and we get to appraisal, and then we would bring you the project with a offer that the district that we have offered based on appraisal and that the landowner has agreed to in concept. Well, what we have now is we have these 4 projects that have all come to fruit about the same time, which is relatively rare because sometimes projects will fall out or they'll go get funding from another funding source. We can't agree on terms. But all of these projects have landed all about the same time. We've agreed to terms and concept with all 4 of them. And because the district has a budget and we have limited funds for land acquisition, it was prudent for the board to come in and provide guidance to staff on the order in which you want us to seek funding for those. So after this step, we will go and seek appraisals for them. We have not gotten appraisals. We have gotten appraisals for one. It's the smallest property on there because that property came in first. And when that appraisal came in and we saw some of the numbers on that appraisal, and about the same time the terms were materializing for the other 3 agreements, that was when we said, well, we need to take these to the board before we spend any money and commit to these landowners on potential offers because of the way that the price per acre is bearing out. And I got into a scenario where if we were to come to terms and come to price with all 4 projects, we don't have the funds internally to fund them. So that is why this list is before you today. What it's important to note is that, again, these are projects that y'all have already indicated interest in for due diligence. The maps are listed in your packet, which we might go through here in a minute. And what the staff land acquisition and surplus team did is we took the criteria that's bulleted on the front page of your memorandum. This is criteria that is listed in the land acquisition and surplus directive that y'all updated as of 2020, as of this year, a couple months ago, but these criteria have not changed for a number of years. And we looked at the GIS layers that make up these different bullets, and we affixed a numerical count to them. So the projects were evaluated based off of these criteria with a numerical number affixed to them. And that numerical number was then scored amongst the entire team and averaged amongst the entire team. And so the ranking you see here, these are not rankings against the other projects. These are simply how the scores fell out. So and I'll give you an example, should we get a new project in tomorrow and we utilize the scoring criteria, which I think given the popularity of conservation easements just statewide, we're going to need to continue a scoring criteria. You may have a project that ranks higher numerically than all 4 listed here that jumps to number 1 because they're all rated on their individual merit, not against the other. I think that's just a key element. Certainly, the board is able to re-rank these projects. This is solely based off of the scoring. That was all we did. And I think that's just important to note. They're ordered, ranked number 1 being the highest scored, number 4 being the lowest score here. And then also just worth noting is we have a project right now in the pipeline for a donation of property in Gilchrist County that the board has previously approved for us to pursue because it's a donation. So our only investment there is the due diligence to get the investment or to get the due diligence completed. Also important to note, these projects are simply being ranked for funding. This does not indicate a lack of interest on these projects by the board's part or the district staff's part in any way. It's just if we fund which ones we're going to seek to fund internally, and then we'll go seek additional funding if we can continue on terms for the rest of these as we work down the list. It's simply a prioritization of funding. With that, I will take any questions.
I've got one. Since we only have an appraisal on one of them, once the others are appraised, the price might then basically exclude them from consideration? Is that, I mean, are there other opportunities that price should come in somewhere along the line as one of the criteria for a decision on moving forward with the purchase of the easement?
So based on our current process is the board says, go get due diligence completed, which includes the appraisal. I think moving forward in the future, we will push a little harder with landowners to name a price, and we will do some initial what we're trying to get to is a process where we do some initial due diligence without potentially a formal appraisal, where as we do these, we can say, okay, the terms they're asking for equate to about X percentage of the asking price, and we can my hope would be to get to an asking price that I bring to you very much at the front end. That's how St. John's handles their land acquisitions, and then you can rank these based off of price too. But based on our current process, price comes once we get to terms, and those terms have been fleshed out. So certainly if you desire for me to go get appraisals on all of these and then y'all continue the ranking, I can. The reason that I didn't is because of the size of 3 of these. It is likely that they'll have over $1 million price tag potentially. That requires 2 appraisals, potentially a third if there's a significant disparity between the 2 appraisals. Our appraisals run between $4,000 and $6,000 a piece. And so before I spent $50,000 on appraisals that may come to, $6 million in land acquisition or to 0 or somewhere in between, I wanted to bring these to the board.
Question.
Yes,
We're doing the negotiations all in-house now.
We are negotiating, Madam Chair. Yes. We are negotiating terms for the easement. So that consists of hunting, yes or no, recreation, yes or no, silviculture, yes or no. And if there's a building envelope ask or not, that's all being done in-house with support from counsel, our legal counsel certainly. When we conduct appraisals, we are required by statute to utilize the FDP approved appraisal. So those are all external. And then if we agree on price after the appraisal's conducted with the landowner, all the survey work and other due diligence would be.
I remember a couple of years ago, we were involved with a group that was handling some. We're not doing that anymore. We're back in-house. And the direction you're going is great. Yes, we would like a little more commitment from the landowners before we spend money.
And it might be just as simple as a question. I mean, we're interested in this price for the land, or we'll do 50% of the appraisal, just some idea of what they're looking for. And sometimes the price is so high that you kind of automatically know that's going to be out of our price range.
So I'll say our rule 40B9 requires that a price be named. So we have asking price included on the application. What you'll typically find is that people will say to be determined upon appraisal. And that has been something that we've moved forward with in the past, because I think there's been, land acquisition has been relatively, it's not been overly burdensome to the district's budget in the past. Mm-hmm. I think now that, again, the popularity of land acquisition and conservation is continuing to increase in Florida with the Florida Forever program, the Rural and Family Lands program, and then certainly all the federal programs, I think putting a little more pressure on that landowner to name a price that they actually expect, because everybody has a price in mind, will help and be fruitful for the district from the beginning. I think that'll help move these projects along a little faster too. But the landowners have all been extremely cooperative. They've done what the district's asked them to do. I think as we manage our expectations from the beginning, that'll help understand what the goals of the landowner is as well.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I have one question. Do we have currently secured funding or committed funding to do any projects, or is any of these going to have to be, or if whatever project's chosen will have to be funded from that point forward?
Madam Chair. We can fund, again, depending on what the appraisal is, and which ranking these bear out, we can fund some, but not all. One, maybe two, especially if the ranking, if the Dixon property were to stay up towards the top, because it's, obviously a much smaller acreage, so it's a much smaller easement cost. You could probably fund Dixon plus one of the other three big ones internally. The remainders, we would seek either legislative budget funding from during the LBR process. We would seek it from alternative funding sources with DEP. We would partner with other conservation agencies, similar to how when Leroy's team brings their projects to y'all as a list, and they say, we're approving these lists for Springs funding or alternative water supply funding or other funding. This is very much the process that I'm hoping that we move to for land acquisition and surpluses. This is what we're interested in. And then we'll just work down the list and find funding for whatever works best for that pot of money. I will say that and Hugh, feel free to clarify this, but when we've been talking through our sister agencies on land acquisition, and certainly that's an interest at the state level, they were interested in helping identify where we might have some potential needs as well. So they're DEP's cooperating with the district and supportive of the district and helping us identify as opportunity for conservation in our region.
No, Madam Chair. None of these, well, check question, because these are conservation easements, so they're not purchased for a fee. I was just curious if any of these my question was going to be, were any of these potential project areas for mitigation and, that sort of thing?
Madam Chair, if you'd like, I can do a brief overview of the projects just as a reminder to y'all before you potentially consider the ranking, and I'll answer that question
Okay.
with the overview if
That would be
obliged.
probably beneficial.
Okay. All right. So the first property that's on your list is the Taylor property that is located in Gilchrist County. It's 941 acres. You can see it listed here, shown in white. It has close proximity to the Santa Fe River, which you see listed here, and then the Cow Creek area, which is all down through here and flows on down through the Gulf. This property, to answer Mr. O'Leary's question, it is of project interest to the district for water storage and water holding. We'll say that this easement itself is just your pure land conservation easement. If we came back with a project option, we would add that as a separate consideration to the easement. So we haven't narrowed that. We know that this is an area of interest. We know that this is an important area for the recovery of the lower Santa Fe Tuckney minimum flows and minimum water levels, or MFL. But we don't have that project defined enough to write it into the easement at this time. And Mr. Taylor has requested that we pursue the easement as a standard land conservation easement. The property is primarily a hay and cattle operation. It has a they had a small, relative to the overall size of the parcel, small watermelon operation that they conducted that has since ceased. There's a 10-inch and a 4-inch well on the property that will only be used for livestock watering. So there will be not an increase in water use, not an increase in intensity of agriculture. It's a well-preserved property. The wetlands. So when we go out and do site visits, we've included one of our wetland scientists to come out with us, or environmental scientists, to look at what the condition of the property is, what conservation would do for that property, why that property might be important to the overall landscape in the area. And her notes were such that this property is very well intact, well maintained. The landowners are doing a good job of maintaining the sensitive areas in their holdings. It is within the Devil's Ear Spring Shed that you can see here. Let me grab my notes. It is also within the Eastern Water Supply Planning Area and the Santa Fe Basin Management Action Plan. Wetlands make up approximately 393 acres of the property. As I mentioned, it's a cattle grazing operation that the landowners plan to continue the low-intensity cattle and hay operation. The current draft easement strongly favor conservation and limited development. This project scored favorably amongst the team for its current protection of resources and its plan to continue low-intensity ag. Although while it is not at significant risk for development, commercial development, the land is at great risk for intensified water use and water quality impairments through intensified agriculture. And like I mentioned, the wetlands are well intact, and the landowner is willing to consider a future water storage project once we have it more defined. So there's no subdivision in the current draft terms. There's no building envelope included in the current draft terms. The retained activities as proposed by the landowner are low-intensity agriculture, recreation, hunting, passive use, silviculture, which is our standard language, with no additional wells or utilities. Any questions on the Taylor property in Gilchrist? All right, the next property for review is the Dixon property, which is in Hamilton County. This is a 50-acre property on the Withlacoochee River, which you can see located here. The green are current land holdings of the district. So this is in what we call our Twin Rivers corridor that is managed currently by the Florida Forest Service. This property has been shown, I think Susie mentioned to me during the run-through, to be linked to Madison Blue, which is north of here. You can see in red up on the top there. It contains a second magnitude spring known as Tanner Spring. It's in the upper western portion, the very upper western portion of the property right here. And the property is also located within the Madison Blue, well, you can see it here, the Madison Blue Spring Shed, also closely located with the Troy Peacock Lafayette Blue Falmouth Spring Shed. It contains 16 acres in the floodway, 25 acres within the 10-year floodplain, and 15 acres within the 100-year floodplain. It's in the Eastern Water Supply Planning Area, Swanee BMAP, and contains 1 acre of wetlands. The property is also located within the Florida Wildlife Corridor, which, as you know, has been a huge focus of the state for conservation properties over the last several years. A lot of funding dedicated to Florida Wildlife Corridor properties. This project is not at immediate risk for development, but it will be over time. Property across the river has already been subdivided. Conservation of this project would protect against subdivision and commercial development. The easement terms favor the district with only a small home site and no subdivision of title. The property contains numerous gopher tortoises and indigo, and they've seen evidence of indigo snake on the property as well. With that, I will take any questions about the Dixon property.
Madam Chair. On the Dixon, it appears that the spring is on 2 different properties.
Well, Madam Chair, so absent a survey, from eyeballing it, and I was on site and looked at it, it looks like they have, absent a survey, at least half of the spring. And the other portion of the spring is owned by the landowner right here. Which, let me show you the light. Yeah, there you can, yeah, that shows. If you see with your bionic eyes, with our bionic eyes, this dark blue pinhole right in here, there's a swallet type feature. That is not the Tanner Spring in question. Tanner Spring is right under my red dot where the white line is going through it. Yeah. So you've got some other interesting features down on the southern end of the property. You've got uplands, obviously, right up here where they've planted those in longleaf pine. And then the parcels that are developed, well, you can see them. This is developed over here. Although this is agriculture, a lot of this has already been platted and subdivided into 1 and 5 acre lots.
It still looks like we'd get good spring protection. That doesn't look developable above it. We're sharing it.
On the other property.
Right.
Any questions on this project? And this is the project, like I said, that came in first. We went ahead and moved to appraisal. And when which again, the statute doesn't require us to distribute that to the landowner until 2 weeks before we bring it to the board or for final sale. So when I received that appraisal, I said, I better bring these projects to the board to rank. So, all right. The next project for your consideration is the Williams project in Levy County. This area is known as Long Pond for the pond that you see indicated in the imagery above. The project contains 749 acres of riverine surface water and is located in the Fanatee Manning Spring Shed. A total of 729 acres are located within the 100-year floodplain. The property is also within the Fanning Manatee Priority Focus Area, the Western Water Supply Planning Area, and the Swanee B Map. The property includes, as you can see through the imagery, a large ephemeral pond known as Long Pond that makes up approximately 392 acres of wetlands. Portions of the property are at high risk of development. The property was rezoned earlier this year for commercial industrial development. And the easement terms of this project do not have any subdivisions. There is a building envelope of approximately 15,000 square feet of impervious surface with 10 contiguous acres for the envelope and associated utilities. The easement allows for conservation banking, and the retained activities also include silviculture, recreation, hunting, and passive use. And if this project, for those that have been on the board since 2018, 2019, may remember this project came before you in under a previous landowner through the Springs project process, and offer was made, but they couldn't agree to price, and the project was withdrawn. But to be clear, that was for fee purchase, not for conservation easement, and that was under a different landowner. But if it looks familiar, it should look familiar. Any questions on this project? It's just south of Chiefland, which you can see right here. Any questions?
Questions from the board?
Oh, I have one more project.
I had
Right.
one question. The red, that is that just floodplain or?
Yes, ma'am.
That's what that is. Okay.
Yes, ma'am. 100-year.
And without mitigation, you could not build in the red area. How hard would it be for the red area to be developed?
I'm going to quote Leroy Marshall. Anything is developable with enough resources to offset the mitigation.
Okay.
Where's Leroy? Is that accurate? Will you answer her question more specifically about the red portion? How hard it would be to develop in the red portion?
Red portion is floodplain. Development in the floodplain can be done. Most approaches in floodplain are done through compensating storage. So you would go to an area that is not floodplain, and if you want to put fill in the floodplain, you would go to an area that's not floodplain and dig it out. And do in a case like this where you have a closed floodplain, you would do a compensating storage, which is just a volume for volume, one for one. Take it, you put the fill in the floodplain over here, take it out over here, and that's typically how you would do it in a closed floodplain. So it's very doable. Wetlands is a whole different story, but for floodplains, it's pretty straightforward.
So there are no really wetlands in this. It's all floodplain.
There are wetlands. There are, and again, this is a GIS exercise.
Right.
So we have approximately 392 acres of wetlands. And this is LIDAR. This is not wetlands. So this is elevation. Just keep that in mind. But I think you can see from here. This is 98, where
That lower green area is the wetlands.
So there are wetlands interdispersed. So Long Pond, Madam Chair, Long Pond itself, I'm not an environmental scientist, so I don't know if it qualifies as a wetland, but certainly any impacts along this fringe, I know would be considered wetlands impacts. So this area down here is higher. There's planted pines down here. There's some mixed hardwoods and planted pines in here. And then there's hardwoods and just natural native, well, I shouldn't say native, natural growth up along this corridor right here. But impacts along here I know would be considered to be wetlands impacts, which would require a different permitting process, as Leroy referenced.
Okay. Any other questions? All righty.
All right, the last project for your consideration is the Hodges property, which is also located in Levy County. It is 753 acres, and it is in southern Levy County. It's near the Rosewood area here. And it, as you can see from this map, is adjacent to existing district less than fee ownership. So the two properties that you see in the hatched green are other conservation easements that we currently own in that area. The McNanny property, which we actually drove by to get into the property, and then the Wakasasa conservation easement, which is shown to the south. So this project is almost entirely made up of riverine surface waters, and it is not located within a springs buffer zone, but the entire property is within the 100-year. So this would have been your springs buffer zone map. You can see it's not within a springs buffer zone. The entire property is within the 100-year floodplain. It's located within the western water supply planning area and is adjacent, as you saw on the initial map, to current district ownership for other conservation easement. The bulk of the property is a well-maintained wetland with little disturbance, and the property is also listed in the Florida Wildlife Corridor. The easement terms for this property, as they're currently drafted, allow for 3 subdivisions only to family members or only to the original grantors. That subdivision would not be transferred down. No building envelope, and the retained activities would be hunting, passive recreation, silviculture, and then our other standard language. With that, I'll take any questions on the Hodges property.
Questions on the number 4?
Madam Chair, just to clarify, when you say subdivision, that's existing dwellings or something that would be subdivided out of the easement? Is that what that means, or?
Madam Chair? No, sir. Subdivisions are subdivisions of title. So when typically, especially unless directed otherwise by you all, by the board, staff, the board, in the district, we do not favor subdivisions of title because, as you might imagine, what this has now is it may have 4 parties involved, 4 landowners, but it's only held by one. Essentially, it's not subdivided in any way. So we don't particularly favor subdividing. So say this property transfers hands to the children or the heirs, whoever the heirs might be, or was sold. Most of our easements, when they are either transferred to heirs or sold, do not allow subdivisions of title. So it is maintained as one project. And that's typically what we favor for management and monitoring, because you have less owners to deal with. Even if you had potentially 12 grantors or 12 heirs that say a property was passed down to, the easement requires that they identify one person as our point of contact and as the agent. And so we don't have to deal with 12 different heirs or grantors. We would only deal with the one. However, when it's subdivided, then that becomes 3 separate owners that we have to deal with. And that was negotiated early on in this easement when it came in last year, prior to it being transitioned over to our office. I think as we consider these coming in, certainly subdivisions will be strongly scrutinized just because of the potential management burden that it can put on for monitoring.
Thank you for clarifying that.
So even though the easement is in perpetuity, instead of one person you have to deal with, then it would be it could be more than one that
to
you'd have to
3.
deal with.
Because they'll each have their own agent.
Gotcha.
But it is only to the current, as the language is drafted, it's only to the current grantors. So that subdivision would only be allowed to the current, up to 3 times to current grantors. It would not pass as the easement passes perpetually. And the language is specified that way. And Tommy's going to make sure that it's legally tight for us.
Okay. Any other questions on this one? Okay.
No projects for this one.
Leroy?
Madam Chair, we have nothing planned at this moment. We gave our scores to Caitlin for projects potential and stuff like that, but at this point we don't have anything planned.
Thank you.
Any additional questions for me on these?
None? Okay. Thank you. Oh, yes, I'm sorry, yes. Keith, would you like to come up and talk to us today?
Yes, ma'am.
All right.
And I'll be brief. Caitlin's done a great job describing the attributes of the property. I'm Keith Rowell with the Florida Conservation Group. We represent the Williams family on the Long Pond property in Levy County. The property is within the Chiefland city limits now and does have a rezoning that was approved recently that does allow some development. The landowners desire us to put this into conservation. You know, the property is part of a much larger conservation project there. We're working on an additional 3,600 acres of the family property, taking it through the FDAC's Rural and Family Lands Protection Program. That's just to the south of it, and several thousand additional acres down between Cedar Key and Otter Creek. She's talked about the attributes of the property. The key here is the family's got a strong desire to put this portion of the property into an easement with the Water Management District, and we're really appreciative of staff's time doing the evaluation and going through the process to negotiate an easement on the property, and hopefully we can move forward in the future. Based on the current ranking, we realize we might be out of funding, but we're willing to work to find additional sources of funding to partner with the district and try to get this protected sometime in the near future. The easement does allow water resource development projects, I believe. I don't know if that was mentioned. Yeah, the key is we're willing to move forward and hopeful that you all have enough funding to do it now. If not, we'll continue to work with you to try to identify sources to bring it into protection. And with that, I'll be glad to answer any questions.
I don't know if I can ask this or not, but
Sure you can. You're the
sure I
chair.
can. Okay. How, since you're working with one of the parcels and not picking out any particular parcel for this question, is on the front end, do you think that a client would be open to giving a anticipated dollar amount?
I can tell you that just generally, we try to wait until an appraisal's done, that they're willing to work and go through a fair negotiation. They want a fair price for them, and obviously you require a fair price for the governing board. You know, being familiar with the process, we understand how that works. And yeah, we don't have an asking price right now. We'll see what the appraisal comes out to.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
And with that, Madam Chair, staff requests that the board approve the ranking of land acquisition projects to prioritize funding for fiscal year 2024, 2025.
Motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, like sign. Motion carried.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right. Thank you.
And with that, we have a presentation from Vince Robinson, our Hydro Data Services Field Program Manager, for you today that we can move forward with, unless you wanted to.
A break sounds delightful.
A break? Okay, we'll do a break real quick.
We're fixing to get irritable.
All right, so in 10:45? Does that give y'all plenty of time?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. We're going to resume our meeting after our break. And let's see what we got here. Which one are we working on?
This is the overview for the hydrologic.
Number 24? Got it. All right.
Madam Chair.
Proceed.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning, members of the board. I don't want to take up much of y'all's time this morning, but I would like to give a brief overview of our network, our monitor network at this time. This is our HDS staff or team this time right now. We have a bunch of hardworking guys, good guys. Some young guys too. Got our youngest employee right there on the, I guess it's on the left of the screen. Kevin, he's fresh out of school, so high school, so he's a good kid. But we're teaching him from the ground up.
Good.
Let's see. This is why we monitor. Basically, it's for water quality, flood protection, natural systems, and for water supply. Let's see. And what we monitor, we want is our water levels, rainfall, discharge, and our agricultural flows. Well, if y'all have any questions anytime, just let me know, and I'll explain anything. These different zones that you see on this map right here is our different technician zones. It's basically based on the left over there. You see the color codes, and this is the different zones that we have it split up into as well. So we have 6 zones for the 6 technicians. Cover quite a bit, each technician. Some have a little bit more than others as far as land wise, but site wise, it all kind of evens out. And then I have a little bit less in my zone. This is our network assignments on average. If we break it down per technician, it's about 7 rain gauges per technician, 70 ag telemetry sites, and then 59 hydro telemetry sites, and basically 2 discharge sites, which is regular flow measurements as far as stream flow. Then ag flows, they usually, hopefully each technician does around 8 and even more a year. So that's kind of an average. It's not exact.
What, I'm going to show my ignorance. What is an ag flow?
An ag flow is basically a technician ag flow is where we have a flow meter that we go out to a producer, and we'd actually put it on the pipe, and it reads, sends a sound signal through the water, and it bounces it back, and it reads the water flow, and that's our ag flow that we do. And then ones we do with a contractor, they'll use the same kind of equipment, and that's the flows that they get as well. Also, there is at some of our ag sites, they do self-reporting. Producers will do self-reporting. That's with a flow meter. It's in line inside of the irrigation line. And so basically what that does, it's more of it's not using sound waves at that time. It's using a mechanical means, and which is the water flows through, and it actually has a counter. It spins it, and that tells you how many gallons they're using. And
So these are on their wells then, what they're pumping?
It's not on public wells, or you know what I'm saying, not on private wells. It's just ag.
Ag, okay. All right.
It's in the line, and that's
Gotcha.
what we're reading.
Madam Chair,
Uh-huh.
is that transmitted, or does it have to be physically obtained, the data?
The data, we collect it. It actually collects it on the machine.
site.
Yes, sir, at the site. Yes, sir. Then we download the file into our records when we get back into our database. What's that? Why we care about the ag flows? Oh, yeah. Basically, I think that's later on, but anyway, basically what it is the runtime, but say like a telemetry site that we have out there, we'll set up a site on, out there, you'll see a box or a picture of a box. But basically what it does is we have a pressure switch that goes back to the logger, and it tells, and basically whenever the pump kicks on, the pressure switch it'll kick on, and when it kicks off, it turns it off. And the logger just basically keeps up with how much time that pump ran. And so basically then there's an average that's associated with that. And so basically when we go out and do flow measurements on the same site, that's just to make sure that it matches up the flow time, and it matches how much water's being used at that time, so they can get the right average. So, you know, that producers aren't getting, you know, saying we're using this much water or that much water. For example, we had a Alto Strawn Blueberry Farm down in Archer. We had noticed that they were using more water this year, you know, on quite a bit more, and we were trying to figure out, you know, what had changed. So so we went out to the site out there, and we were offered to do flow measurements out there for them because they do self-reporting. So they have inline meters, and we went out there and we noticed that several of the meters had been changed recently. So they had new flow meters that they had put in, and we had noticed that on all the new ones that they were using more water. It was saying they were using more water. And so what had happened was when they had put it in, he didn't set he didn't calibrate it correctly. So that's why they were using more water. But so that's just a check and balance that we do for them. And so I mean that worked out good for them as well because they weren't using, you know, more water. So that worked out good.
I'm sure.
But,
I got a question, and you seem to know a lot about ag water use. I'm curious, when an ag pump, if you got a 12-inch well, 10-inch, 12-inch well, and that motor's running, it's pumping water.
yes, sir.
Unlike a house well that might have a tank and a pressure switch that cuts the motor off, that thing's running all the time.
Yes, sir.
So it's going to pump X number of gallons out, and then it goes to, say, a center pivot irrigation system. If that pivot irrigation system's been retrofitted for, you know, low volume nozzles and so forth to reduce the water use, how do they restrict that water to keep it from just being more pressure going through a smaller nozzle?
I mean, I don't know exactly that side of the, I mean, I know what comes out because we basically, when we hook up our instrument, it's right past the pump. So it's after the pump. So it's right in there. But I know that, like you say, you can't necessarily slow it all down, but I think most of that's done somewhere on the pivot at the nozzle, the reducer. So I think, I mean, it slows it down to a certain amount, but like you say, we're basically just reading whatever that's letting it flow past. You know what I mean? It might slow the flow down a little bit, but I'm not exactly sure on some of that.
Can I
Go ahead.
ask if you can? Mr. Thompson, the way that they actually make that adjustment, there are a number of ways, and Vince touched on one of them. You can take what we used to call a high pressure system, which the old style systems were the ones with the big guns on top. And you primarily only see those associated with dairy wastewater applications now, even though there's a number of dairies that are refining even that to go to the drop systems, which are a lot more efficient. But the way that they actually truly adjust that pressure is that the drop pipe has to be pulled in the turbine that's associated with the bottom of that irrigation system has to be pulled. And there's literally a series of bowls. They're metal bowls that reside on the bottom of that drop pipe per se. And the irrigation vendor will adjust the number of those bowls. The greater number of bowls on that system, you develop higher pressure. So they'll actually reduce those. That's a lot more costly to retrofit a system that way. You can get benefit from an efficiency standpoint just by adjusting the top side, everything above dirt with it. But to get the maximum benefit, you do have to adjust those bowls out of the bottom. They don't pull those systems very often unless they do have a problem or they do a full change out on it. But those bowls the number of those bowls gets adjusted.
All right, okay. That makes sense. I knew there had to be a way, but changing the pump or the amount of volume that the pump pumps is the only way to do it. Really.
And I know sometimes at some of the diesel sites, they'll actually just slow the speed of the motor down. So that'll give them more or less water as well.
And one other thing, Vince mentions the diesel units, changing the RPMs of the motor. Some producers have actually gone to, if they have an electric supply, they'll actually put what they call a variable frequency drive, a VFD motor, electric motor on there that they can adjust the number of RPMs of that motor as well to compensate for pressure changes.
Makes sense. Thank you. Sorry.
Those are all items that the district has cost shared on for a number of years.
Basically what we have right here, this right here is the flow measurement we're doing with the ADCP unit. Where the kayak, that's where we're measuring the flow right there going out, downriver, but you put it on the kayak and you're able to paddle it across, and once you make several passes back and forth across, then you'll have I think it's 720 seconds of data. You actually have to have that much before you can, pretty much in that flow, that measurement. But a lot of times we'll go past that range because you want to look at it, you want to make sure you have good reciprocal. You have to have a pair. Once you go across one way, you have to go back to finish that. It's called a reciprocal pair. And once you get that done, if it looks good on the data, making sure you look at your data, make sure there's no missing data, then you'll have a good flow measurement at that time. The other one on the right hand side is a weighting rod. It's called a weighting rod measurement, where you pull a tape across an area, and you basically either go a foot or every 6 inches, and you'll do a certain amount of time there. And then on that one there, you're basically counting the clicks. Basically what it is, it makes a clicking sound on your earphones up there, and that's basically what you're reading, and then it's all calculated out in that way. That's a price meter on the right. At this time, we have 46 active rain gauges throughout the district that we maintain. We service them every time, we service them 3 times a year, and 1 time a year we have to do a calibration to make sure they're correct in the reading. And if they get out of calibration, we have to send them off, and they have to be recalibrated. Sometimes they're popular for target practice as well, out in especially Mallory Swamp. It's a lot of target practice out there. Let's see. Right now we have 102 active surface water sites that we monitor. They could be on lakes, bridges, or rivers, creeks, streams. That's your surface water areas. Right here on the left, you can see some of the target practices that's been going on. I believe that's Rocky Creek up with Tom on there. I believe that's Rocky Creek. That site's been shot up several times in the past, but we keep putting it back up and keep it running. That's me on the right, and we're doing a bridge measurement. That's a radar unit that we have up there at Nobles Ferry. And basically what it is on the side right there, that's it's a wire weight gauge, which I'm letting down to the water. I don't know how familiar y'all are with all of our different, or all of our equipment, but basically it's set to a certain elevation, and then you take a wire weight gauge and you let it down to the water surface, and there's a dial on it. You read what that is, and that's your elevation that you plug in. Make sure it's matching your radar unit that's on the bridge. Make sure your data's correct.
Since Richard's not here, I'm gonna ask the question, is the one on the left in Dixie County?
The one on the left, no, ma'am.
I'm just
It's
checking.
it's up in Columbia County.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Northern Columbia, yes. Northern Columbia. Yeah. No, Mallory Swamp though is that's usually the real good spot for our practice down there for sure. Let's see. Right now we have 256 active groundwater monitoring sites throughout the district. The one down at the bottom right there, I'm not exactly sure where that site is. I'm pretty sure I've been to most of them, but some of them do look very similar. That's for sure. This is the guys out there in our building, not the lab right now, but out in the Kirby building. That's our box building setup out there, where we're building boxes, getting ready to go out in the field, and we'll have several lined up. So when it's time to go out, we can go out there and get them put in pretty quick fashion. That's ag. Your ag telemetry and your hydrotelemetry are real similar as far as the box build goes, but there's a little bit different setup inside, and the programs are different on the loggers. And that's basically your but the rest of it is basically the same. That at the bottom right-hand side is a typical setup. That's actually right out here, outside this building, right over here to the left. We were doing that one day for I believe it was a video for Roy. But anyway, that's kind of what they look like. Right now we have currently 424 active ag telemetry sites that we're monitoring and keeping up. That's a picture of a typical ag installation that we have out in the field. Basically what it is that you have a pressure, that's your box and your solar panel, but on the little gray box below the white box, that's where your pressure switch is, and that's what we tie into the ag system. There's different little ports on the on your pipe coming out, and then you can you unscrew that, you screw another fitting in, and then we can tie in with a pressure line, and that's what gives us our readings out there. So it's hard it's a lot of work to keep them up, especially if they got any kind of cows love to eat those plastic lines off of those sites. Let's see. Right now we currently have 1,069 active electric monitoring sites at this time. That's sites where we have a contract with or we necessarily have a contract, but we have producer information. We do have a contract, but we have their producers' permission to get their data from their electric company, and so we don't have a telemetry site per se out there. We still do flow measurements on them, but we don't have to have a telemetry site. In the last 3 years, we've had 568 measurements in the last 3 years, ag flow measurements. That's including contractors and staff as well. This is basically a chart showing the increase in sites from 2011 until now. And I mean, every year it's going up. That's for sure. Our network has tripled, since 2011. Our strategic initiatives, radar, basically what it is now that we're trying to do, or we want to do, is, I guess a good example of it would be the storm just hitting Steinhatchee. USGS, we had a gauge right there by the bridge, but it's on I guess it's like a little county pier right there, a city pier. And we had just, I guess USGS had just took that back. So they were actually doing the monitoring this time. But every time they have a storm event or a hurricane, that site would go underwater, and we would lose, what the high point was during that storm. So basically that would be a good candidate for that would be a radar unit on the bridge, the big bridge going into Steinhatchee from Jenna, and that site would never go underwater, and we could always tell exactly what height, that storm event was. And now, there's no way of really knowing exactly, because we lose that data. So that's another, reason why we want to refit most of our sites that are around the water or bodies of water, especially around the coast. We want to put them on bridges and things that aren't going to go underwater. And also the radar units usually don't lose their data, or they're not affected as much. So they're usually a lot better data that comes from the radar unit. So that's what we just purchased some of those, and we're going to be installing those at several sites. So that's one of our, also a lot of our equipment as far as loggers, which is the computer part of the box. A lot of them's getting old, 15 years, or some of them even older, and a lot of them are just starting to fail after that amount of time. They just start to have glitches. They'll lose time, and then they'll try to come back, and it won't be the right time, and it just fouls up the data. So we're basically, and that's on both ag and hydro sites, but we're trying to redo all those, bring everything, up to, I guess what you say, make it more modern, I guess you'd say, as they fail. Also, another thing go ahead.
One thing,
Go ahead.
that's what Robbie was talking about earlier. He said they had the storm surge to 11 point something until we lost our monitor.
We lost our monitor, and that's, I mean, I think that would be a good thing to know, because, during the last, or the storm that, that hit, when Roy's got messed up the first time down in Steenhatchee, they were trying to figure out, I guess, what was the height, because our storm, it went underwater then as well. So everybody's saying, what is that height? What is the height? And so we actually went down and did a survey, or we did a vertical survey with some of the equipment we have. And we went to, Roy's, and we had a water line. And so we took that water line and shot a elevation from there to a known benchmark. And that's how we figure, what they had down there.
Right.
But now if we had, if it had the radar unit, then you know exactly what it was. And you never lose it, which is.
Can't do it at Roy's.
Can't do it at Roy's anymore. It's gone. We'd have a hard time getting the survey there now. But that will be helpful. I think it's going to make a big
Well, that
deal.
seems to be and one other question before we get too far off of it, on the ag, on the electrical data gathering. Do we go out every couple of years and do a physical to see if because you could have more efficient equipment, drawing less electricity, producing more water. Do we
You could
substantiate that somehow?
Usually if they have some kind of a change, or if it's on the permit or something on David's side, I don't know exactly, not necessarily a equipment refit. I'm not exactly sure. Sometimes there is, and then we do know about that sometimes, but a lot of times we find out about it if we're going to do a flow measurement out there. That's the only really, by going and doing flow measurements, we kind of keep up with how much the water use, and then that's some way they can do it. But I mean, like you say, it's hard to really know if they go out on their own and refit it or do something without letting us know, because we don't really go to those sites a whole lot, because
the technology on pumps today, I mean, they're using way less juice than they used to.
That is true. That is true. That would be a good thing to try to figure out exactly if they retrofit or upgrade, and how that would correlate into water use, like you say, because they use less energy, less power. That's for sure. That would be. And then also too, we're working on another thing that we're trying to do is we've had a problem in the past with we've got some sites that are still on private property that we've had in the network for a long time, and we're trying to figure out, because we have access issues. Sometimes a lot of people are getting older, they're selling their properties, or so we run into issues. And so basically what we want to do is to move those sites, put them on either our property or some kind of state-owned property or county-owned property, basically, so we can always have access to it. And then we don't have the troubles, with dealing with who owns it or somebody selling it, and that's kind of another big push we're going to have. We're going to try to get rid of all of those sites like that, so we don't have any issues in the future. And also too, we're working on trying to get all of our sites surveyed in, so we have a better idea of, where we're at on everything. A lot of stuff that's been in the past, we just, I mean, not a lot, but I mean, every year we knock out more of it, but some of it still got, assumed elevations. We want to try to get rid of those. And that way we know all of its known elevations. And so we're just basically cleaning up the whole system and trying to modernize it. So it'll be ready for the future, basically, on that. Any question? Any more questions?
We didn't hold them, did we?
Oh no, ain't no problem. I enjoyed them. It helps me out too. Questions, because a lot of stuff, like you say, I don't. It gives you good questions to ask. The program. That's helpful. That's for sure.
Are there, Chair, are there going to be any changes in the DEP rulemaking that's going to affect the monitor?
I wouldn't know that. No, sir. Don't know that one. We can find out, but I don't know that one.
And do we suspect that we have some changes coming up?
So,
I will let Amy answer this in a much more robust way, but it depends. I will answer like Leroy does. It depends, but there is some language in there that will have impacts relative to monitoring. Certainly, our monitoring conditions right now are for systems with 8-inch wells with 100,000 gallons or more, and there may be opportunities to look at that and evaluate that relative to where we know that we have known impacts. So the answer is it depends. The draft language, I'll let Amy respond on the current draft language relative to monitoring.
Madam Chair,
Yes, please.
at this point, it's going to depend on how the permitting conditions are issued for the permittees, and that language for permitting conditions has not yet been workshopped, to my understanding. But I do think that we are going to be under increased scrutiny and increased pressure to be as accurate as possible with our water use estimates for all the sectors in our district. And so we'll be continuing to focus on how we can improve our estimates for water use across the board.
Okay. Bennett,
I
have
would
you answered?
suspect so.
Okay, yeah. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Vince, do you plan to go back and survey like you did before to find the surge levels?
That is something I did for, I guess it was Kelly Godsey in Tallahassee. I did that for him this time. What's that? Yeah, with National Weather Service. We can still do that as well. I think that'd be a good thing to know. He hasn't contacted me at this time. We did it for him, but I mean, for us as well, I think it'd be a good thing to know.
There's a lot of people asking the question. We've wondered, so there's plenty of people have marks that can tell you where the water level was around
Right,
here. So.
and that'll be helpful. We probably will send a team down there and try to figure that out.
You the guys with the district truck that's got all the back heavy, a lot of stuff in the back covered and everything?
Oh, no, sir. That's Stephanie. I think that's the bigger truck. That's
Yeah.
3/4 ton.
Right.
Yes, sir. That's not us, but no, I plan on, like I say, it'll be a good thing to know. But before, that's one of the pushes hopefully I'm gonna get one on that bridge is what I want to do. The one from Jenna over the tall bridge, so we don't have any issues of ever knowing what that level was anymore. And it'd be real time too. It'd be nice to know real time, the increase, how fast does it come in, or, how fast does it go back out? I think that'd be interesting to know, or helpful.
One more question. We've established the need for the radar box.
Yes, sir.
Do we have budgeting for that this year to where we could start, or do we
Last
need to arrange something?
This past year, we bought 5 units, and so that'll get 5 more. They're roughly about, like say 5 units, so they're roughly about 2,500 apiece. But once we get through with that, I think we're gonna need about 4 more to pretty much get most of our stuff in, on radar. So that'll be good. So I think that it's in our equipment budget. So I think we'll be able to do that.
Good.
So hopefully next time we have, or I don't want to have another storm event, but I'm sure we will probably, but hopefully by then we'll have everything on real time. So we'll be able to watch it and see exactly, what it did.
It makes it a little easier to monitor too, though.
I think it does too. And you don't have to worry about losing your equipment, So
Yeah.
I think that whole area needs to be rethought out. I mean, we have already moved several of our sites that had flood issues before, and we didn't have any trouble. So, as we do that, it's going to help us out, I think, a lot.
Appreciate it.
Since I know on Idalia, the storm surge came in places that it's never come in before. Do we ever look at how far inland the storm surge comes ever, or just basically the depth?
When I was down there, it was only the depth, but I mean, we have a strike team that goes out and actually marks areas where water has gotten to, and then maybe I think they GPS those locations at those times. I mean, I remember how bad the Idalia was, but I know this past storm was way worse. Down at the Gulf, my family has property down there, and it was the highest I've ever seen, and I've been there since I was a kid. And I believe it was, I don't know if y'all are familiar with Swanee coming into when you're coming into town on Swanee, before you get to the dump that's on the right, there's a curve with the old house on the left that the guy's been working on for a while. But water went all the way out to there. So I mean that's a long ways for flood water to go. So it was something else, that's for sure. A lot of destruction, a lot of loss. We had I think 4.5 foot of water. We had I think we have a single wide, like, fish camp, little house down there on the salt side, and it's 5 foot to the floor off the ground, and then we had 4.5 foot of water in the house. So
Wow.
a lot of water. I'm thinking.
And how far off of the coast is that?
Right there, we're probably off the front. If you consider the coast, the basic barrier out there, the barrier on the front, I'd say right there we're a half mile. So I'm thinking it went 2 miles, 2.5 miles, somewhere in between there, inland. What I'm thinking.
It went way, and it was.
A lot of water.
Yep.
It came in fast. A lot of people wasn't ready. But it was something else. Hope we don't get another one like that. Any more questions?
All good?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Madam Chair, that concludes our items. I would just like to note that our land management team and Vince's team have been out conducting field inspections relative to Hurricane Helene, which you're going to hear about the timber salvage sale side of that this afternoon, because we've had to pivot on the workshop since they're out doing hurricane response, which was not the original intent of that workshop, but we're going to fill that time with something of importance to you. And Hugh may mention this in more robustly later, but I just want to mention that Vince's team has made themselves available to go support the Southwest Florida Water Management District should they need it with cut and toss crews post Hurricane Milton. So that's something that will be, if that works out, relative to their needs. But I wanted to make mention that they're making themselves available for that to represent our district as well.
That's awesome. Just be very, very careful.
Very good. Very good.
That concludes our item.
Thank you.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board. Before I start with the Water Resource Division updates, I do want to mention, as it relates to the coastal flooding questions, that is something that there is active work going on using the high water marks to survey. So that might be something that Leroy could address at a future workshop, if you so desire, to talk through those projects. We have some people that are assisting with using that data to make predictions for that. In terms of the update for Water Resources Division, thank you for approving the 5-year Water Resource Development Work Program by way of the consent agenda. That's one of the statutorily required reports that will become a component of the consolidated annual report next year. So this is kind of the early phase of starting to get those different chapters that go into the consolidated annual report before the board for some review and approval. That will also be the case for item number 26, which Dr. Sean King will be presenting. That's the minimum flows and minimum water levels priority list. That is another component of the consolidated annual report. And then for item number 26, Susie Hetrick will present a surface water improvement plan, or SWIM plan, update. She is working on those, as you did approve for the Swanee district, or sorry, for the Swanee River Basin last year. She's working on the rest of our coastal systems now. The only other announcement I wanted to make is that we are still open for public comment on the Lower Santa Fe and Ichetucknee MFLs. We have continued to engage with stakeholders on that, and we continue to encourage them to reach out to make comment to DEP so that all of those comments can be considered as they work through the next round of changes to that rule to address public comment. So it's open through the end of this month, and I would encourage anybody to submit that hasn't done so already.
Okay.
With that, I will hand it over to Mr. King unless there were any questions.
Dr. Brown, are we getting many comments or many inquiries with
Yes,
regard?
there have been a number of comments submitted to DEP, and they're trying to consolidate those into one place. We will review them in detail, but just now we're starting to review those comments as they've come in and just see what can be addressed based on what's being submitted.
Well, again, that's communication. Getting people involved before the rule is actually implemented is key.
Correct. And I do want to encourage people that these comments are going to be reviewed. We are looking at these comments, and we are looking at what needs to be addressed from the comments. So
Can you tell us who the comments are coming from? Is it the public at large, or is it utility companies, or
All of those.
all of them?
Public at large has commented, utilities have commented, different groups that are representing stakeholders in our area, including agricultural groups. So you're getting comments from a number of different types of voices.
Good.
Madam Chair,
Uh-huh.
those are organizations I'd expect to be keeping their ear to the ground, but how about the general public? I'm not hearing from them, is there publication out there that, I've talked to county officials that don't seem to have a lot of knowledge about it.
We have reached out to our local governments to make them aware of the rulemaking, and I know that some of them did tune in during the rulemaking that occurred during the public workshops, both here and then the ones previous to this most recent round. So they have been made aware of it, and they are participating. I think the degree of participation probably does vary depending on the group. And then also, as permittees are coming in, there's engagement with our regulatory group that's also making them aware.
Yeah, there just doesn't seem to be a air of interest or
I mean, I think it does.
understanding the criticalness of.
Correct. It does depend on the individual. For some individuals, if your water supply that you're dealing with would be a domestic self-supply, then of course, you have the statutory right to self-supply your own water. There are also individuals who are getting their water from public supply. Again, then the public supply entity would be the one that I think they would be looking to engage on this issue. And again, we are seeing some utility engagement on this issue.
Madam Chair, just a question on, I think it's great the engagement that we're doing, but this is it's a long process. Were there other opportunities back when the minimum flows and levels were being set for this kind of engagement and feedback to begin?
So it has been a very long process. There was public comment accepted at the different, as different documents, like the technical report, the peer review process. There was public engagement and public comment consideration going back through all those different steps. And then certainly at this district, as stakeholders reach out to sit down with the district, we always try to accommodate that and try to understand what those working issues are. But I agree, it's been a long process. There is a rule currently in effect. There's a draft rule that has been drafted and under some form of rulemaking for quite some time now.
Yeah, and I asked that question. It seems like there maybe a lot more engagement now as it's getting closer. But I think that makes sense. But further back, we can push that engagement throughout the process. I think it's a better.
Right.
Madam Chair, if I could add in, and to speak to Mr. Lloyd's point, is that, this is, we're in the one of the public comment periods. I do not believe, and Amy, correct me on this if I'm wrong, but I do not believe that DEP intends for this to be the last public comment period. I think the intent is to get these comments in, get them assessed and incorporated into the document, and then follow up with an additional outreach effort associated with that.
All right, good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board. I have an item for your approval today. This is for the 2024 minimum flows and minimum water levels priority list. And this is basically required by Florida statute. Each district needs to submit their list of the water bodies that they'll be working on for developing these MFLs for at least the next 3 years. And that has to be submitted to the Florida Department of Environmental Protection, or DEP, by November 15th of each year. As we go through this, statute does give us a little bit of guidance to basically prioritize water bodies that are either important regionally or have potential for impacts due to withdrawals. Those are some of the criteria we've looked at to develop the list that you can see on the map here. There's also a table in the board package that kind of lists out each of these water bodies and gives a little more details on those. But I'll kind of walk you through what we're proposing here for this 2024 list. So if we start with the water bodies that are in gray, those are just the ones that have MFLs adopted. You can see several of our coastal rivers, as well as the upper Santa Fe, have MFLs, and those are ones that aren't currently scheduled for reevaluation. There's a few others on this list, like the Wakasasa River, that have MFLs, but we're putting them on here because we want to reevaluate those MFLs, which is kind of part of the process here. So then going to the systems listed in the lighter blue shade, those are ones we are put on the list for 2025. That includes the lower Santa Fe and Ichetucknee and those priority springs that Amy just touched on. Those will be on the list as we continue to work with DEP and the St. Johns River Water Management District on the recovery strategy rule updates. If you recall, those entities are involved because of the cross-boundary withdrawal impacts for that system. And then we also have the upper and middle Suwannee River segments for 2025. I presented, some updates on that in the last year. We're kind of getting to the final stages, I hope, of the MFL technical work for those rivers, and can bring that back to you once that's finalized. But we're also coordinating with DEP and St. John's on those systems because of cross-boundary withdrawal impacts. So we'll keep working with them. And then there are 3 different spring systems on here. So we've got Troy, Lafayette Blue, and then Falmouth Spring, and some that are associated with that through known cave connections. Those are also on the list for 2025. Those are the springs we've been working on the most, particularly Lafayette Blue. We've kind of been pilot testing some new methods for setting MFLs and doing those technical analyses. So we hope to take that forward to peer review early next year, hopefully. But we'll be presenting more on those springs MFLs as we start getting the draft reports together for those. And then for 2026, those are the systems in green. We've got Peacock, which also is connected to Bonnet and Telford Springs. And then we've got Madison Blue Spring, which does have an MFL currently, so that one's going to be a reevaluation. And then that would also include this lower section of the Withlacoochee River here. So, we're working on those right now. Some of the data that Vince was going over, we're incorporating into these analyses. So that we think could happen for those systems in 2026. And then for 2027, we have another set of springs here in orange. Those are the ones on the upper Suwannee, basically including White Sulphur Spring, Suwannee Springs, and the Alapaha and Holton Creek Rises, as well as a few others there. So those, we're also collecting data on, and, we're kind of working on the methods for those springs. We hope to be able to move forward with those in 2027. And then you'll see several systems here, particularly springs in purple. Those are systems we've currently put on the list for after 2027. Many of these are priority springs, which are required to be on the list by statute, because all first magnitude springs and then all second magnitude springs on public lands that are being preserved for conservation purposes are basically required to be on the list. So we're going to keep working to get to those, and may be able to do this faster, but it's going to depend on how these methods are I guess received as we go through peer review and as we continue to develop ways of looking at these springs for MFL purposes. So you'll see a lot of those along the middle Suwannee in particular. We've also got the Wakasasa River and Levy Blue Spring, and the Withlacoochee River and Hardy Spring, the upper part of the Withlacoochee River, are all in that purple shade for after 2027. Just a few other highlights here. You will see on the list for after 2027 also that we've added back on many of the springs on the Santa Fe River, because we also want to be able to more spring-specific MFLs for those, because currently they're kind of more reflective of what's going on in the river in that location. And then we've also added a system here that's Owen Spring, which is right about there. That one we've determined it basically meets that criteria being a second magnitude spring on public property. So that one needs to be on the list as well. And then the only system that's been removed for this year is Cherry Lake, which was up here in Madison County on the list previously. For that system, as I've presented, we've done a lot of technical work, but then determined there really isn't much of a potential for groundwater withdrawals to affect that system. So we're proposing to take that off the list so we can kind of prioritize our focus on these other water bodies. So that's all I had really on this map.
John, before you lose the map,
Yeah, sure.
let me ask you a question. What area is it that the sturgeon generally go to spawn?
Yeah. So they have been documented to spawn basically in this whole stretch kind of right here, but there's a particular section right in here that seems to be one of their primary spawning grounds, kind of just upstream of the Withlacoochee confluence and kind of downstream from Alapaha Rise there.
So when we're prioritizing our MFLs, what MFL areas affect that spawning area?
Well, so that, the sturgeon analyses are going to definitely be a focus of the upper and middle Suwannee River MFL. So these bluer stretches that I'd say we're more or less done with the sturgeon part of the analyses and have those updates done. We're still working on some of the upper Suwannee details, particularly the lower flow conditions. But then, we would be coming back to these springs up here, and we'd also be looking at how those springs contribute flow to that section of the river, that ultimately feeds into those spawning areas.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions on the map? Okay.
All right. So I'll go ahead and read the recommendation, which is for the board to approve the minimum flows and minimum water levels 2024 priority list and authorize submission of the approved list to the Florida Department of Environmental Protection pursuant to Florida statutes.
Is there a motion?
Make that recommendation. That motion.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, like sign. Motion carried. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good morning.
Madam Chair, members of the board. My item for you this morning is informational. You don't need to take any action on it. I have a brief presentation for you on the status of the district swim plans. We are currently working to complete the Coastal River Swim Plan, the update of that plan, and the purpose of my presentation this morning is to familiarize or refamiliarize you all with our what a swim plan is and our process for adopting them and where we are in the process for the Coastal River Plan. So what is a swim plan? The acronym SWIM stands for Surface Water Improvement and Management. The swim plan is a document that guides our work toward improving the district's priority water bodies. A swim plan summarizes what we know about a water body related to its past and present conditions, and it outlines strategies and specific projects aimed at improvement and protection of those water bodies. The legislative basis for swim plans came about in 1987 when the Florida legislature passed the SWIM Act, which directed the water management districts to develop plans for improving and managing our priority water bodies. Now, Florida Administrative Code lays out specific rules for information that swim plans will contain. I will not read all of these to you. The list includes a thorough description of each water body, the impacts affecting those water bodies, studies that have been completed or are still needed, strategies for restoration and protection, a list of proposed restoration projects, and funding needs identified to support those projects. Prioritizing and revisiting strategies and projects to improve our surface water bodies is one of the main reasons we update our swim plans. In addition, updating our plans is an opportunity to identify new information or issues affecting the water bodies. And it also gives us a chance to reach out to the public and our other stakeholders to seek their input in as we revise the plans and then get ready to put them to work. So a bit of history about the Suwannee River Water Management District swim plans. We started with 6 plans developed between 1988 and 1995. As I mentioned earlier, the SWIM Act passed in 1987, and we produced 1 plan in 1988, 3 in 1991, and then 2 more in 1995. In 2017, we hadn't updated them in a while because funding had ceased for them, so we leveraged a grant and updated our plans, and at that time, we consolidated the 6 into 2. And we ended up with the Suwannee River Basin Plan and the Coastal Rivers Basin Plan. And in February of this year, we completed the update to the Suwannee River Basin Plan. So we'll be coming back to you a little later this year or early next year with the update for the Coastal Rivers Plan. And just for the benefit of the folks who were here in February or folks who were not, this is a map of the Suwannee River Basin Swim Plan area. It includes the watersheds of 5 of our major rivers. And then this is a map of the plan area that we're working on now. The Coastal River Swim Plan includes the watersheds of 6 of our major rivers, the Osceola and Wassissa, Pierre, the Econfina, Fenn Holloway, and Steenhatchee, which are considered to be part of the Coastal River Basin, and the Wakasasa. Swim plans typically include identification of issues affecting the priority water bodies. Strategies for restoring and protecting the water bodies are also part of the plans. And for our district, our strategies typically include monitoring and data collection, research, development and implementation of water supply plans and MFLs, water resource development and conservation, and strategies for the improvement and protection of water quality and natural systems. We take all of this together and lots of other things and maps and culminate these things into what's essentially a wish list of projects and initiatives proposed to support the plan's management and action strategies. Projects that support a swim plan could include septic to sewer projects, alternative water supply projects, or mitigation and restoration projects. And I've shown on the bottom of this slide a few of the projects taken from the 2017 Coastal Rivers Swim Plan that were completed. And then the photographs on the right are of a portion of the Wassissa Springs Improvement Project. The district's current swim plans are available online through the MySuwanneeRiver.com homepage by clicking on the Science and Data tab at the top of the homepage and following the Plans and Reports link in the menu on the left. And then once you're in the Plans and Reports page, you scroll down to the Surface Water Improvement Plans link. And that's where, if you click there, you will get to our current plans. Looking forward in this process for the Coastal Rivers Plan, we are still preparing the draft to meet the statutory and rule requirements. And once we have a completed draft, we will submit it to DEP and our other stakeholder agencies for their review as required in the rule. We'll solicit public input with a public workshop. And once we have everybody's comments, we'll bring the revised plan back to the board for approval. Once we have an approved plan, we'll submit that again to DEP for final review. And once they have accepted that, we'll bring it back to the board one more time for adoption. So I look forward to seeing you all again, either later this year or early next. But this concludes my presentation to you. If you have any questions for me, Madam Chair, Board.
Questions from the board? None? Okay, thank you.
Good morning, Madam Chair and board members.
Good morning.
Thank you all for being here today. I know it's quite challenging right now, and a lot of folks are weary from dealing with the storms, but my heart goes out to South Florida, Southwest, and St. John's, facing them right now. It's where we were at a couple of weeks ago. couple of things that I wanted to mention that we've got, and I am appreciative of our staff here over the work that they have done in working not only in our district, but we are prepared, as Caitlin mentioned, we are prepared to send some teams out to both St. John's and Swift Mud area following the storm to assist them as any way possible. And so we'll be working on that, and I'll keep you all informed as that arrives and where we're at with it. Damage wise, you all have seen a lot of the damage that has occurred across our district, catastrophic in many areas with that. Relative to the irrigation systems across our district, it's been documented over 400 of those systems that were damaged by the storm, whether they were just overturned or they were corkscrewed. And so there'd be a major effort going forward, and there's still a lot of assessments associated with that. The poultry industry suffered as well with their poultry houses. I think the last report that I'd heard, there was a count of around 26 poultry houses that were flattened. And then certainly the dairy industry, we had a dairy representative here this morning, and they've incurred losses as well with some of the structures associated with their operations. And that doesn't extend to the amount of just residential and structural damage that we've had and some of the industrial damage from the area. But we will rebuild and overcome this. It was a bit encouraging. Last week I was able to get out and tour the coastal area down around Keaton Beach, Perry, even Madison and Lee. A lot of damage over in that area as well. But when you get down to the just off of Highway 19 out of Perry, you can see the storm surge, and that's quite a ways inland, several miles inland, as to where the swell came to with that, and then certainly the damage that was incurred along the coastline. I know several of you have property in that area. It is sobering to see that kind of damage there, and we'll wait and see what Milton holds for our board or for our district and as well as the other districts around the state. We did have a few staff that, just to bring you up to speed, we did have a few staff that incurred some structural damage to their homes. I'm not aware of anything major. I guess that depends on how you want to define that. But we didn't have any housing structures that were obliterated, similar to what we incurred here, some roof damage and some minor structural damage for staff. Power outages and certainly tree damage, as you saw here at the district, that was quite common with that. I did ask Tyler, I sent a couple presentations just to keep the board informed, and these are similar to some of the presentations that I'd sent you all during Helene with it. This is the 9:30 briefing that we received this morning. Just kind of an overview talking about, and I'd certainly be happy to send these updates to you relative to the storm itself. The threat levels that they're anticipating at the 9:30, and there's behind this, I've also got an 11 o'clock update that I'll present for the Big Bend area. And keep in mind, I am not Jim Cantori, nor am I Kelly Godsey, the National Weather Service, that can speak to these, but I think the graphics speak for themselves. Again, it was downgraded to a Cat 4, but they're anticipating that it could rebuild back up to a Cat 5 with landfall at a Cat 3. So pretty catastrophic for the area. The models primarily agreed upon the Tampa Bay, St. Petersburg, Clearwater area. With the landfall in that region. These are some of the other disturbances that Robbie spoke about. And, 12 miles an hour, that's what Helene was doing when it was setting out in the Gulf. Once it started ramping up speed. with this. I think the idea is that as it gets closer, certainly it's slowed down, or the magnitude of it has downgraded some right now, but that tends to make it grow in size when it gets to that point. These are the wind threats that they're showing even up into our area. Whenever you get into tropical storm forces, those are greater than 39 miles an hour. So the fair warnings with it, some of the probabilities that we will encounter with those winds. These are for southern Dixie County, central and southern Dixie County, 1 to 2 in 10 chance of significant tropical storm force winds categorized for that area. These are the arrival times for those winds as the 9:30. The 11 o'clock has some similar predictions that you'll see here in just a moment for the Big Bend area as well. Some of the duration of the winds anticipated and the arrival times based upon the locations of those areas. The amount of inundation from the storm surge that we are looking at, and even the negative storm surge is expected to be quite impactful to our coastal area. Our rainfall right now, it's not looking like a Debbie, but there is considerable rainfall, particularly as you get closer to the cross point with the storm in our southern part of our district, with the rainfall associated with it, more than what we saw with Helene, I think, at least in those areas. Further north here around the office, maybe not quite as much. That's what we received off of Helene itself. The excessive rainfall, which you can see, I know it's hard to read that legend on there, but even on up into Georgia, they'll be anticipating elevated rainfall levels. These are our flood predictions. What do we do with our data? This is some of the data that are utilized from the state side of it with our flood predictions. Thankfully, none of them are in major flood. These are all on the Suwannee at Brantford to the far left, Rock Bluff in the middle, and then Manatee Springs on the right. Certainly our rivers will be climbing some based upon the rainfall. What they did say, fine print you can read off of this, is that relative to some of the flood predictions, it's highly relevant upon the amount of rainfall that the upper Santa Fe receives as it makes its way down through the river system itself. Probably had more data on that earlier. Tornado potential, it's there, not to the extent that that we have had with some of the others, certainly with Helene when it came through. Okay, Tyler, can you pop up the next one? This is only a couple of slides with it. Can you magnify that some, Tyler? There we go. I'll let you move it. How's that?
Here we go.
These are the time. This is 11 o'clock update as far as landfall goes and the storm location itself. Thursday morning, center of the state, what they're looking at. The latest updates that they had was making the landfall and traversing the state and exiting still at a Cat 1 category. So certainly the entire breadth of the state will feel this as well. Next slide, Tyler. It's down. You can see where they've extended the tropical storm watches. I mentioned that in the previous presentation. They've extended that some to the north, DC, Suwannee County, even the upper reaches of Suwannee County there, relative to the tropical winds that we'll be feeling for that. Next. And then our rainfall threat, you can see the numbers. You magnify that just a little bit, Tyler, if you help. There we go. Thank you. You can see the rainfall threats that are being predicted. Certainly the rainfall increasing as we move further south throughout the district with it. Next. I think that's the last slide. That is. So I just want to present that information, with, the latest information that we've got. We do continue to monitor with the state calls. Every couple of hours, they have one of those, so we pay attention to that and make decisions accordingly. And I think, Madam Chair, with that, we do have a workshop. We have a land management work plan, an activity summary for that. And Ben mentioned that we were going to reschedule the tour of the lab facility, so we'll take that off of the agenda itself. And that's all I've got, Madam Chair.
Have you got anticipated closure of the?
We are looking, based upon the wind threat, we are looking, considering closing the office. We'll still wait till later today to make the call as to whether, I definitely think Thursday, because of where the storm will be located. We'll probably have office closure on Thursday. And it's very well possible we may be closing tomorrow or tomorrow early to give staff time to navigate back home for those that are not working remotely, especially given the evacuation traffic out there. It's some unsafe conditions. I know some of you experienced that driving here this morning, and it'll only get busier. It reminds me of Irma in 2017.
Yep.
With that, but yes, ma'am, that's what we're looking at right now. St. John's and Swift Mud have both closed their office areas. And St. John's actually canceled their board meeting that they had scheduled today. And they'll be closed tomorrow and Thursday, preparation for the storm.
Pew, I heard that the governor had signed an order for 75 to be all northbound.
Be off?
All.
So I'm not aware that he has closed that. Tim, I don't know if you heard anything. Tim stepped out just a few minutes ago for the 11:15 update statewide. But
Yeah, there was no mention of that, and I know that we had Troy check with FDOT on that as well, so that's not been.
It would not surprise me, Mr. Charles, for that to happen. But
yesterday they were talking about such Bridgelock that they were.
There was some discussion about, we heard something about that yesterday. We verified that it had not occurred at that time anyway.
They were running on it this morning, I can tell you that.
That's all I have, Madam Chair.
Okay.
Y'all know, obviously, Madam Chair, members of the board, previous to coming here, I was with FDOT. And so I reached out yesterday. We started hearing some of these rumors as well. My conversations late yesterday is there are no plans to do contraflow. Contraflow was an idea that has never been implemented in Florida, which means all lanes of the interstate are going in one direction. Back in 2017, 2018, ahead of Irma, FDOT implemented shoulder running, which is basically they would open up one of the shoulders to do 4 lanes of traffic northbound. People liked it so much during Irma, they ended up making their own fifth lane, taking one of the other shoulders to go north. I'm not going to be surprised if that's happening again this time around based on the traffic flow. But from my discussions with DOT yesterday, because I wanted to confirm those rumors because we were getting questions about them. They said that at the time there were no plans to shut southbound down and everything was going to go through the shoulder running to go north.
Okay. Thank you.
Pretty sure there hadn't been any speeding tickets in the last 24 hours.
Probably not. There have been some collisions, but no speeding tickets. Yes, ma'am.
Madam Chair, we have a very short workshop that Caitlin's prepared to do if we want to do it after we adjourn the meeting and start for lunch.
Okay, that sound good to y'all? Okay, so is there a motion to adjourn?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adjourn. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Pose like sign. Motion carried. We'll now open our workshop.
All right. Hello again, Madam Chair, members of the board. So as mentioned on your workshop agenda, we had planned to do a land management FY24 overview of activities performed with the funds that you allocate every year that we are so grateful for, and a anticipatory FY25 work plan outlook with some strategic initiatives that we're having planned, and to just similar to what Troy provided with communications and Vince provided with the hydrologic data services, land management was going to offer a similar summary and overview. But that was all planned and prepared in advance of Hurricane Helene. Now that Hurricane Helene has hit, staff are out doing recon field operations and relative specifically to timber salvage. So I am probably the third string for you today, but wanted to give you a quick overview of what staff are out doing, and we will bring that land management presentation to you at the November meeting, barring another natural disaster. Heaven forbid. So, relative to Hurricane Helene that hit in late September, as we're all familiar with, the district actively started evaluating potential timber salvage sales that needed to be conducted to try to recoup as much timber revenue as possible. And if you're familiar with the timber industry in any way, not whoever gets there first usually has a jump on the market because other people will likely be salvaging their timber as well. Stephen Carpenter, who handles our timber sales and our timber revenue, has done a phenomenal job in the past. We've had some damage in Hurricane Idalia, and he continued that proactive assessment of our timber tracks in our most impacted areas for Hurricane Helene as well. The other issue that we have, although we're on the waning end of it, is we certainly don't, depending on the age of the timber, we don't want a lot of wood on the ground and have the opportunity to introduce bugs into that stand, which then can then spread and become a regional problem. So we certainly don't want to be the source of that. But we evaluated tracks based off of the location of the hurricane, and certainly our tracks in Taylor, Lafayette, and Dixie County, which are our Steinhatchee Springs and Steinhatchee Falls tracks, were highly impacted. This map that you see in front of you shows where we are going to have salvage sales. So the green area shaded is district ownership. The blue, red, yellow, purple, and other red are where we're going to have salvage sales on that Steinhatchee Springs track alone. The challenge, as you might imagine, is that these are tracks that we could actually get to. So the roads are a problem. These are known salvage sale locations that we're going to have to try and get wood off the ground relatively quickly. To do that, we have to get wood out of the way, trees out of the way to get the wood out of the stands. So we have, at this time, we have approximately 1,000 acres that we're having to salvage sale throughout that area. We anticipate and it depends on what we can get from the mill. If we can get it off the ground in the next 2 months, we have the potential. This is all chip and saw primarily. So this is our high dollar, high value wood that we want to try to recoup as much as possible. We got quotes back yesterday for some of those stands. The highest cost came in at $22.50 a ton, $25 a ton, and $33 a ton. Normally we get, depending on the market, between $35 and $48 a ton. So we're definitely see a reduction in tonnage costs there. But we want to get as much as we can. There is some mixed pulpwood, about 10 tons per acre that Steve's estimated of pulp in that area. The pulpwood prices are $1.60 per ton, $1.60 per ton in the wet area, and $10 a ton in the dry area. So we're definitely going to see a loss on pulpwood prices in the wet area. So that's in the Steinhatchee Basin. Right now, areas that we can get to. This is the Steinhatchee Rise track. This is just where, you can see we've got trees blown over. And these are going to be where you've got situations like this where you've got, 50% or more of the wood that's either leaning or on the ground. Those are clear cuts. We don't try to come in and do select cuts. It would be a nightmare to manage when you go and replant and try to push fire through there. So we will clear cut these stands. This is significant loss in that area. So that's just a sampling of photographs. If you want to see more, we'll be happy to do a site visit. Hopefully it will be clear cut by the time y'all see it, because that means that we had folks bid and we had loggers come in and get to work. So that's the Steinhatchee Basin. The other basin that was hit hard, at least that we can get access to, is what we call our Twin Rivers Corridor, which is in the Upper Swanee and the Withlacoochee, along the Withlacoochee corridor. And we have two known salvage areas right now that make up about 400 acres. We're working with the Florida Forest Service to to get access to that timber and identify what the damage is as well. We even yesterday found another potential 500 acres. So that puts us closer to 1,900 acres of lost wood this is near our, and that was on the Holton Creek track. So this is in our Twin Rivers tracks right now. And some of the photographs of that area are these photos as well. So overall, prior to the 500 that I heard about yesterday, at the 1,400 acres, that's a timber revenue loss on the conservative side of about 1.66 million. And then that'll be less whatever we can try to recoup back. But on the conservative side, 1.66 million in timber loss. In areas where we will not be able to get the timber off the ground, say somebody doesn't want to bid on it, say that the salvage time, you got about 2 months for chip and saw to get it to the mill to make it merchantable. You've got about 5 to 6 months on pulp to get it to the mill to be merchantable. Anything after that, you are pushing and piling and burning. If we have to push and pile and burn stands like this, we're looking at between $1,200 and $1,500 per acre in cost to push, pile, and burn. And then obviously we'll have to spray and reforest that. So it's not only the timber loss cost that we are missing out on potentially, but also the cost to reforest that area as well, which on the 1,400 acres, if we have to push and pile and burn it, will be upwards of 2.3 million when it's all said and done. Between the push, pile, and
Makes me
burn.
want to throw up. Yeah.
Caitlin, is that worst case scenario, push pile burn scenario where we don't get it, can't market it? Is that a FEMA reimbursable expense? Do you know?
We are, so far, no.
Historically, it has not been, sir.
But we have asked, we will keep asking to see if they change their minds.
Yeah. I have concerns, long-term about our, budget for land management. Timber's been a nice little addendum, if you will, in revenue that is in the long term is going to go away because the overall objective of the district is to take these stands back to a natural state, and timber revenue is going to fall way off. Do we as a district have an objective to either ask for more funding from the legislature, or do we have another? Are we able to divert funds from some other source that will augment what we get now, which I believe is roughly $2 million, give or take, from the state revenue fund now?
For the land management purposes, yes, right. I'm trying to remember
$1.77210. We get $1,777,210.
But recently, we have been able to almost double that with timber revenues, right?
Timber revenue. It has. One of the things that we did receive last week, Friday afternoon, about 4:00, was a request from the state relative to looking at resiliency funding and funding to help offset damage incurred from Helene. And we did submit several projects relative to funding, and timber reimbursement for our timber lost was part of that. The 3.2 million, Caitlin?
Mm-hmm. It'd be the math of the 1.66 and the 2.3.
Yeah.
Although I undershot that given what I was told yesterday. So I was using the numbers I had as of Friday at evening. So
Yes, Shay, we'd had a pretty good year going so far. Well, 80% harvested, but 140% of what projected revenues were gonna be, so that was good.
So relative to timber revenue, Steve Carpenter, who handles our timber revenue program, does a phenomenal job at making sure that our timber cruising information is up to date and that he is using conservative numbers to project out revenue 5, 10, and 15 years. And so he has a tool that he has created and is using to help estimate what the district can plan. I say we didn't plan for this, so plan for relative to timber revenue. He takes his job of $1 million in revenue per year very seriously and works really hard to help accomplish that goal. I'll say that we will, in some form, the district will have, you're correct, Mr. Thompson, as we reach what we call our desired future conditions, which is a state that we would like to see from a conservation perspective. Timber revenue for first thinnings and second thinnings will taper off over time. I think what you'll see is where we've got situations like this, some of these stands were very close, if not had met their desired future conditions. So we didn't necessarily plan to harvest what were in its entirety. I'm going to speak in blanket terms, harvest all this timber. So now we'll go back. It'll be expensive to replant, but hopefully when we go to harvest this in a first or second thinning, we'll recoup some of that money in the future. So this is a unanticipated occurrence. It'll be an unanticipated reforestation, but the revenue from this after reforestation will also be unanticipated because it was reaching its desired future condition. As Hugh mentioned, we asked for the projected revenue loss on Friday when they asked for the Hurricane Helene dollars. We also submitted a legislative budget request, which I think we mentioned at budget time for Hurricane Idalia timber loss and just the increase in timber management cost of about $3.3 million is what I think. So our budget runs roughly around $4 million. We have for costs with that includes salaries. We don't usually spend that every year, but that's the budget that y'all approve thereabout. Like you mentioned, we have an appropriation of about $1.77 million. We have timber revenue of another $1 million, and then district funds supplement the remainder. So your concerns are shared very much by the staff. And that's why when we look at land projects, we look at them very critically.
Well, and this is a question probably when the land management team here comes, we can get answered, but that stand particularly, you said it had just about reached what would the desired.
Well, I shouldn't use this stand. It might, probably more
Yeah,
like this
well,
one.
say a stand had reached the desired, stem count, or whatever. When these stands are clear cutted, do you know if the objective then is to go out and replant in a manner which would bring it to that state quicker? Meaning, rather than solid plant and thin, would it be plantation planted to start with?
We do not. We plant, I can't remember if 700, one of my foresters would have to be here, about 700. That's stems per acre. That is much lower than the production level for anybody here who's used to tree planting. That's, can be upwards of 1,000 stems per acre. So they do plant at a somewhat reduced rate depending on what the species is, but they plan for a certain amount of die-off within that. And then again, we plant with the idea that we'll get a first and potentially second thinning on that too. But we don't plant at what we would consider plantation reduced rates just because you're going to have die off and the cost to plant versus the revenue you get from the thinning usually makes it more beneficial to plant heavier so you can thin. And I'm sure there's an ecological answer to that a forester could tell you, but that's the practical application.
I'm actually in favor of that. That's
okay.
Makes good business sense. Thank you.
That way at least you're covering your cost of planting and, yeah,
Yes, ma'am.
management.
Question.
Yes, sir.
Are we able, if we need to, utilize funding out of our acquisitions account for management? If we, instead of acquiring more property this year, if we need the money for maintaining what we already have, are we able to do that?
It would depend on the funding source and what the intention of that funding source was. So we have some funding dollars in our.
We have some in-house, yeah.
Well, and yes, sir. So some of our acquisition dollars are historical dollars that were given to the district for acquisition, specifically for acquisition, and to utilize those funds in any different way would first require action from the board, but primarily be with permission from whoever granted that funding originally, such as DEP.
No, we just hope we don't come to that.
Yes, sir. And that concludes my presentation. Like I said, this was not the intended presentation for y'all to have, but given the storm and the field operations that are ongoing, we felt like this was more appropriate use of your time.
It was a very good presentation.
Was a very good one, very appropriate, makes me want to cry. The loss, that's awful.
Yes, ma'am. Presentation.
So that concludes our workshop. Is there anything else that we'd like to discuss before we close our workshop? Nope. Okay. Is there a motion to close our workshop?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, like sign. Motion carried. All right. Ms. Robin, are you?